Well, good morning everybody, and can I extend a warm welcome on behalf of members and officers to this full council meeting. Can everybody up the back hear me okay? Could you just maybe raise your hand? Fine, thank you very much. Could everybody ensure that their mobile phones are switched off, please? Thank you. Before we go into the agenda proper, just to remind members that the council will adjourn 12 noon at the latest and reconvene at 2 p.m. to allow members to attend the funeral of former councillor, the Reverend John Jenkinson. And I think it would be appropriate at this time for members to stand, and we'll have a minute's silence for Reverend Jenkinson. Thank you very much. That takes us on to the Sederant.
Thank you, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Present.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Present.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
Present.
Councillor Balfour.
Present.
Councillor Binney.
Present.
Councillor Bissett.
Present.
Councillor Black.
Present.
Councillor Blackwood.
Present.
Councillor Bowes.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Present.
Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs.
Here.
Councillor Flynn.
Present.
Councillor Garner.
Here.
Councillor Goldie.
That's true.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Kerr.
Present.
Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Councillor McCluckie.
Here.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Present.
Councillor Monroe.
Present.
Councillor Murtagh.
Present.
Councillor Nicholl.
Present.
Councillor Nimmo.
Present.
Councillor Patrick.
Present.
Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears.
That takes us to declaration of interest. We'll read it out for clarity. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time?
We do, Provost. Can I declare interest in the motion and progressive closure of the Forth and Clyde and Union Canals? I have been a member of the steering group of the Friends of Charlotte and Das. I don't think it's an interest that is so close to the topic and debate that I need to preclude myself from the debate.
I'm also a member of the Friends of Charlotte and Das.
That takes us to item 3, Minutes and Information Bulletin, 3A, minute of the 7th of March 2018, pages 70-23. Can we approve it as a correct record? Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Provost. Some informed correspondents to the Falkirk Herald have recently alluded to the possibility that there's a parties in coalition or at least in collusion in this council. I would like just to refer members to page 12 and the vote that took place for the motion. For the record, Provost, you will see a mix there of Scottish National Party members and Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party members voting together on that particular issue. So I do hope, Provost, that lays to rest any claims that the Scottish National Party and the Conservative Party will not, or perhaps may or may not, depending on the issue, vote together in future votes. It just seems to be, Provost, that a number of correspondents have tried to paint a very different picture outside this chamber.
Provost, just on that particular point, I did raise at that time, but I did say you don't need to be the weatherman to see which way the wind blows. We knew there had been a deal done, Leader of the Council says there hasn't been a deal done.
Excuse me, Councillor Goldie. Excuse me.
We treat that guarantee from Cecil Meikle John the same way the people of Greensmith will treat the fracking ban after yesterday's court.
Councillor, it's for approval as a correct record. I said to people at the beginning of this period that it's an honour and a privilege to become the provost, but there's nowhere that I'm going to sit here and be abused or have anybody else abused or disrespected. So, any other questions in relation to the correct record of 3A minute of 7th of March 2018? No? Move on, thank you. Have we agreed that then? Thank you. That takes us to item 3B, minute of special meeting 5th of April 2018, pages 24 to 28, for approval as a correct record. Any questions arising from that?
Yes, Provost.
Perfect.
Several times during that particular debate, the comment was made this was a Tory motion, solely put forward by the Tories. We understand, Provost, that the second part of the motion was actually penned by the Labour Group leader. I was wondering if he'd like to retract his previous statement as a misleading statement to the Council, that he had no involvement in that particular motion.
So your question and the accuracy, could you tell everybody the page that you're referring to, Councillor Alexander?
24.
24. That gives you an opportunity to look.
I don't need to look, Provost.
Sorry. Excuse. It's okay. Okay then, the legal interpretation, it isn't a question, the accuracy of the
19.1, Provost, how about that? Get a legal interpretation on that? Because it's very important that I clarify. I can understand how Mr Alexander's squirming there. I had no
Councillor Goldie, Councillor Goldie,
I had no input into that motion.
Councillor Goldie, can I say that we're not starting in a very good vein this morning, but the fact of the matter is that the question is quite clearly is the accuracy of the minute. There's a question had been asked there by Councillor Alexander with a legal interpretation that didn't reflect exactly what we're looking for as an approval of the correct record. So once again, 3B, minute of the special meeting on 5th April 2018, approved as a correct record. Any other questions are in relation to the approval? Agreed? Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 3C, volume of minute, volume 3, 2017-18, and for noting, members may ask any questions.
Provost.
Right, Councillor Patrick. And if you could refer to the page when...
Yes, certainly, Provost.
Perfect.
First of all, turning to page 352. It's in the Appeals Committee. It's simply a typographical error. Much though I've got a great affection for the term John, as far as Councillor Kerr is concerned, he would prefer to be given his normal name of James. Perhaps that could be corrected. And may I also turn you to a more serious matter, to page 385 of the report on the Pensions Committee, obviously a committee that I've got more particular interest in. The situation there, to recap very briefly, was that following the pension fund evaluation in 2017, there was a situation arose where a small number of employers had problems with the revised contribution rates, and that, as it says in the first paragraph there on page 385, they are finding that the contribution rates are not sustainable. The next paragraph makes a proposal which is repeated under the decision that in certain areas organisations may require to be financial support from the Council, and the proposal is tabled that in fact the councils will raise these situations and discuss them in full council. Perhaps I could ask the Chief Executive or Chief Financial Officer when in actual fact we can expect to receive a report and the opportunity for this to be debated at council.
Provost, if I can pick that up. As Councillor Patrick outlines there, there is an issue faced by all pension funds where certain employers in the fund, typically small employers, quite often charities, are facing particular pressure in terms of affordability of contribution rates. The actuary, as part of the valuation process for 2017, has identified a potential win-win situation that might allow such organisations to withdraw from the fund. So that, in overview, is the position. My colleague, the pension manager, I know he's on holiday this week, but he is working up a report, and I think in the first instance that would go to the next meeting of the Pensions Committee in June, and thereafter I would imagine it would be referred to the Executive.
Provost, may I just say that in actual fact obviously it will be debated again at the Pensions Committee, though the important factor here is that it is in fact debated within the Council, and it would be my hope that in actual fact, since all members will have a particular interest in all pensions matters, that you might be persuaded at the appropriate time to have that debated at full Council rather than Executive.
Thank you, Provost. On page 83, we have the minutes of the Community Planning Partnership, and I note that the first of these minutes is dated the 7th of September. The following one is November, which is some 8 months ago. It says in the first of these minutes that there were further meetings on 18th of January and 15th of March, neither of which are here. I'd like to know why it's taken so long for these minutes to come to this meeting, and I'd like to know whether the January and March meetings took place. Thank you.
Yes, I can confirm that the meetings took place. I'm not sure they were exactly on those dates because we did have some weather issues. The position is that the minutes would normally be approved at the next meeting of the board so that they could then come to Council for information. So certainly the January one should be here, and I apologise that it's not here. I'll make inquiries when I go back upstairs and get those copied out to members.
Yeah, Provost. Page 374, extension item 105, update on the West and Central Advice Hubs. Now, at that particular meeting, there was a discussion concerning the new hub to be based at Falkirk Library. During that discussion and at the end of the meeting, we did agree that the Director would be instructed to go away and study the situation concerning the safety and the hazards of people trying to get across the road, particularly the elderly or people with young families. That should have been minuted, Provost, and I don't understand why it's not being minuted. Could we, first of all, include it in the minute? Mr Frawley will have his notes, and could we ensure that I get an answer?
Yes, Provost, I understand the minute has already been approved by the Executive at its April meeting, so it's not open to the Council to change the minute at this stage. It's been approved by the body whose proceedings it minutes.
Yes, that would be right. However, having said that, if officers were approached before that, I can discuss the officer personally upstairs who was approached before that minute came out. And I had raised it then, and I'm now raising it. That's not to disrespect your position. That's a cop-out. It was mentioned at the meeting that should have been included in the minute, and it's now been mentioned again.
Provost, can I ask who chaired that particular meeting?
Yeah, hold on a second. Thank you,
You've all plenty of...
excuse me, Councillor Goldie. Excuse me. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Goldie, please. Mr Moody's on his feet.
Thank you, Provost. I'm happy to look into the matter further that Councillor Goldie has raised. I do recall that there was a request for information, and I think the Director of Development Services did indicate that she would provide that information to you. I understand you're raising a point about whether that should be included in the minute. I'm happy to look into that for you, but as matters stand, it is a minute I understand has been approved.
Okay, we'll move on. We're now on to item 3D, the
Provost.
Provost, you having a good memory will recall at the last meeting I made a plea for education services or children's services to... It's in general, because it's not there, Provost, despite my request at the last meeting. Can we hear assurances from the convener of Children's Services Education that in future the very good news I'm sure that education has to broadcast to us is done in the way that it was formerly done via the information bulletin? It's sad that I've got to repeat what I said at the last meeting, Provost, that education really need to step up to the plate and contribute more towards the information bulletin. It was always valued in the past, so can we have that done, please?
Does you want to respond to that? Yeah, we're getting an assurance.
It was raised at the last meeting, but I think Mr Naylor might be able to confirm that it is actually already circulated to all members by email.
Mr Naylor, do you want to confirm?
Apologies, I wasn't at the last meeting. My understanding is that we do circulate within the information bulletin inspection reports, and all local members receive a copy of inspection reports as they are published.
No, that's not good enough, Provost. It's not inspection reports I'm looking for. It's the good news that happens every day in our school. Those of us of more mature vintage will recall that in the past, the good news, what happened in Madison School, St Margaret's School, and every school throughout the district was conveyed to members in some detail through the information bulletin. It enabled members to see what was going on in our schools, and we all enjoyed reading it. Sadly, of late, it hasn't been there.
Okay, thank you. You've made your point. I'm quite sure that officers will take it on board. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for the information bulletin? Young lady, Councillor Cole. Thank you very much.
I just want to raise page 4, the disability confident employer. And I think I just want to welcome this. I think it's a very good news story for the Council. I welcome the work that's been undertaken to support our own employees who are disabled or who develop a long-term condition or become disabled. It is very important that Falkirk Council supports employees now, but also develops the framework, policies and actions to be fit to support an ageing workforce who are likely to have more long-term conditions. We know that more people will be working nearer to their 70s, and we want to put in action now to progress towards a Level 3 award will stand us in good stead to be prepared for the challenges and opportunities of the future. So I think it's a good news story, and I very much welcome it.
Thank you. We all agree with you for what you've been saying there. Any other questions arising for the information bulletin or committee? Councillor Reid, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. It's an issue which in the past has been, I think, unanimously supported across the Chamber, and that's the issue of changing places. It's 47, 48 in the bulletin, but I think it's 48 and 49 on the iPad. And it's about the award of tenders for the provision of changing places at Graysmary Sports Complex and the Mariner Centre. Now, my understanding is that that exhausts the current budget, and I just wondered what future provision was going to be made. I've ticked off Mr McElholm as it's coming up, so I'd appreciate an answer.
Yeah, so is to confirm that the works at the Mariner Centre and Grangemouth Sports Centre are underway at the moment and due to finish in the next couple of weeks, and that combines with some changes to the Mariner Centre. The overall disability access has been significantly improved as part of the work that's been undertaken, so that's quite a significant step forward. In terms of future opportunities, we have established a cross-sector working group to look at this, which includes families and people directly concerned in terms of their own needs as service users, and we are exploring the possibility of both the west and central hubs having changing places toilets included in the work that we're doing around those developments. In the more medium term, we're looking to promote the adoption of changing places toilet design in shopping centre facilities to more commercial venues. People may have noticed in the press recently that there has been a development agreed at the railway station in Dundee. That's something that we would want to pursue for any refurbishment of our own rail facilities. And in the longer term, and probably driven, one would expect from Scottish Government legislation, we will expect to see change to planning regulations so that all new developments of a significant size are likely to have this requirement in. So very much what we've done just now is a starting point, and we're very clear that there will be further development as time goes on.
It's a subject that's been of a lot of interest, again, across the party lines. Councillor Meikle-John, obviously, for personal reasons, was quite involved in it. The premises that spring to mind are the toilets in Glebe Street, which you're almost halfway there, in fact. And I wondered if that had been discussed by the working group. It used to be called the Super Loo.
We certainly have, I don't know the specific toilets, but we have looked at adaptation of existing public toilet facilities, and for reasons which I don't have the detail here just now, we don't think those are viable for adaptation. But as I say, there are a range of other adaptations which we're seeking to take forward.
I think we can speak privately about that. I'll involve other people as well.
Provost, can I just add to that there's obviously a voluntary group that we're working with at the moment to perhaps look at purchasing through some fundraising a portable PAMIS loo that could be used for events. There's not very many of those available in Scotland, and they are in high demand, particularly where there's large public events that where children in particular come together. But we're working with them to see if we can identify a place and a purchase facility that could be used within a rural local authority area and perhaps hired out to help cover costs to other local authority areas.
Thank you for that information. Any other questions arising from the information bulletin, or can we agree? We agreed, and put that away out your road. Perfect. Thank you very much. 4, which is questions, and there's maybe just to clarify that there's none being submitted. That's fine, so we can tick that off. 5, which is the role and action log, and it's pages 29 to 34 on your agenda. Councillor Reid.
Yes, Provost, it's not what's on the log, it's what's not on the log, if I have your indulgence to
Yep.
raise that. In September, having listened to Wiser Council, I withdrew a motion about the establishment of a youth councillor, because that was a kind of knee-jerk reaction. I think there's broader issues involved. So work apparently was to be started on a report brought back to you with the executive. September to me is a long time, and I just wondered what progress, if any, had been made on the establishment of some sort of body for consulting the young people in our area. Now, I do understand how busy the officers concerned have been, not least with the EPIA and so on, so there's no criticism intended. It's just I want information. Yeah.
Provost, I may be able to assist as because certainly I've been trying to keep on top of this, as obviously there's a number of youths involved. We did have a vacancy which has delayed the progress, and I understand that the consultation process is actually in progress at this moment in time. I don't have a detail of when there's a report likely to come back, but I'm sure Fiona Campbell will be able to provide that with an update, and we can express our concern that we don't want this to drag on any further. But I do know that there has been some work carried out in relation to this, and I think it may well be at the collation stage, so we may not be too far away, but certainly just give you assurance that it hasn't been forgotten about and it's not off the radar.
Thank you. I think we'll maybe bring in Mr Ritchie. If you could maybe give us an input. Mr Ritchie, thank you.
Thank you. Provost, as Councillor Meikle John has said, we've just been undertaking some consultation. The general feedback that we've had from the youth that we've consulted with is that they would rather do something in an online basis rather than have a formal set-piece council. We're currently just finishing off that consultation. We're drafting a report and we'll bring a report back to the next meeting on that.
I had alerted Ms Campbell to the fact I was going to ask the question, but it was in the wee small hours last night, so she's probably missed it.
Thank you very much. Can we agree the rolling?
Provost?
Yep.
Page 31, the Bonnybridge Scottish Transport Appraisal Guidance, the STAG. This went forward. My former colleague Linda Gow raised this in 2016. I do see from the paperwork the executive on 26th of September 2017 agreed to undertake a stage 1 pre-appraisal. We know that all that's gone on, but this has taken far too long as far as we're concerned. Sorry, somebody. No, if somebody thinks the STAG report's a funny thing, I'm happy to let them speak. Aye. Provost, maybe you should address yourself to the other side as well. That might be beneficial. Fine. Well, we're concerned at the time that this is taken, Provost, and we're asking when are we going to get started here. It says at the end, should the pre-appraisal receive a positive reaction from Transport Scotland, the Council agreed on 28th of February, funds should be made available. So we'll again say there will be more funds available. We only want to know when we're going to get stuck into it, Provost.
Okay, thank you. I think we're all waiting. And this coming forward, I'm going to bring maybe Mrs Geisler in, if she could maybe update us. We did get an update a couple of weeks ago for Kevin Collins, who's been involved with it, just to say that the progression. If you remember that during the budget process that we ensured everybody agreed to additional funding to ensure that the process was carried forward. But I can understand your position. Mrs Geisler, could you maybe update everybody regarding? Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, as members can see from the note, there's a fairly extensive note there that's been provided, and as you say, I think Mr Collins did provide more information to members recently. The appraisal process requires to follow a set pattern that's laid down by Scottish Government, by Transport Scotland, and we're in the process of doing that work just now. There's a conclusion should be drawn relatively soon, but there requires to be a public consultation exercise as part of the process. That will be done shortly and over the summer period, and we'll report back to members, as we see in the update on at the council meeting in September.
Okay, you happy with that, Councillor Goldie? Yep. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions in relation to the role and action log? Thank you very much. Can I just say at this point, I know it's difficult for the opinion, but the fact is that if somebody's on
their feet and they're speaking, please allow them respect. If you don't agree, well, this is an opinion area. It's all a matter about opinion. But the fact is that what it does is it causes unnecessary grief when somebody's speaking and we get interruptions, and then it can go from one thing to another. The fact is that if somebody's speaking on an issue and you're unhappy about, well, the fact is you'll have an opportunity as well. But please try and respect everybody. Thank you very much.
Provost, can you clarify that comment? I don't recall anyone actually saying anything when Mr Goldie was on his feet.
Okay, that takes us now to item 6. It's a referral from Executive 2018, and it is a Treasury Management Strategy. I think it's Mr Snail. I think Mr Snail is going to come to the report.
Thank you, Provost. As you say, the Treasury Management Strategy for the current financial year was submitted to and considered by the Executive at its April meeting. Consistent with the Treasury Management Code, that strategy requires to be referred on to Council. The recommendations you can see in para 2.1, 4 recommendations there. If there are any questions on the report behind it, the one that was considered at the Executive, I'd be happy to try and address any such point. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Provost. Approximately 10 years or so ago, RBS, as it then was bailed out by the UK taxpayer by an amount which an independent Scotland, of course, could never have afforded. Indeed, it would have bankrupted an independent Scotland. However, thanks to the broad shoulders that is provided by our friends and colleagues in the rest of the United Kingdom, the bank has survived. Now, it is, of course, a commercial concern, although the UK taxpayer remains very prominent in its shareholding. The decisions are for the board of the bank to make. Now, I do note and this isn't to prove that this isn't a political point, members of Parliament from all sides, from the SNP, from Labour and the Conservatives, have challenged many of the decisions being made by the Royal Bank of Scotland no later than earlier this week, in fact, before the Select Committee. Now, it is barely 6 months, Convener, since many of my constituents were greatly disadvantaged by the action of the bank in closing the branches in Grangemouth and Stennismuir, and that was bad enough. But, however, I am very disturbed to read in the Daily Mail yesterday that many jobs are being exported from the United Kingdom to India, and the people in India are being paid £1.19 an hour. Now, I know and I appreciate that Mr Smale cannot do much about that in the greater scheme of things, but I would hope, Provost, in the negotiations that took place between Falkirk Council and the Royal Bank of Scotland, assurances were sought about the viability of the existing branch that in Falkirk that exists in this area. I think that is the very least that we could have expected in return for the money that the bank will be investing with them, to get assurances that there will be no more bank closures in the Falkirk area. So can I ask if that was even appropriate? If it's not appropriate, of course I would accept that from such a fine officer as Mr Smale. But I would like to hope that the message from the administration, if not officers, was that if we're going to give you this amount of money, then at least can you provide a service to the constituents that we represent in Falkirk. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Provost. We, in awarding the contract to the Royal Bank, are required to follow due process in terms of tender requirements. The Council put out a specification which was then used to assess the competing tenders, and following that due process, which is assiduously followed in terms of both quality and price, the Royal Bank emerged as clear winners. I can't address precisely Councillor Nicholl's question in terms of the issue of branch closures. I would have to say that it would not explicitly have been part of the tender valuation process. As I say, the Council set out a clear specification, and as long as the bank were capable of meeting that specification, their tender would be considered appropriate. So that's perhaps not the answer Councillor Nicholl would ideally have wanted, but that's where we've ended up.
No, and I did say that I appreciate that Mr Smale's hands may be tied on this, but can we please take the opportunity to send out from this chamber a message that should there be any more bank closures or declosure of the existing bank, then Falkirk Council will take a very dim view of that, and we would be entitled to re-tender, wouldn't we?
I don't think we...
Is there a contract with the RBS?
Yes, that wouldn't be a breach of the contract. My learned legal colleagues would be able to more precisely advise on that, but I'm pretty sure that of itself would not represent a breach of contract. What I would be happy to do is to reflect concerns raised in the Chamber and relay them directly to our customer relationship manager with the Royal Bank.
I'm sure there would be no member in the Chamber who would disagree with that.
We'll ask that question because
So, before I bring you in, I'm just going to ask, do you want to speak first before we take...
Well, I was actually hoping to be able to move the report, Provost, and that would be the normal practice.
Right, no problem. But the fact is, in relation to the question that Councillor Nicholl raised, and
well,
Mr. Smeal...
perhaps I could address that.
You'll address that in your summit? Okay, fine, okay.
Thank you. Can I first of all say that there was no division and that there was no issues raised at the Executive, therefore I move the report as it is. But just in response to Mr Nicholl's comments about the bailout of the Bank of Scotland, the Royal Bank of Scotland, perhaps we need to think back to who caused the banking crisis in the first place and put the whole country into recession and reflect on who was in charge at that point. What I can say is that I have been involved with representations and indeed correspondence with regard to the individual premises, banking premises within the Falkirk district area closing, and there's been all-party representation sought on that. I know that Councillor Garner had included Councillor Harris and Councillor Blackwood in some meetings in relation to particular issues around Denny. So I think there is a cross-party support there, but perhaps some political influence further up could be used to those that are indicated that they are in a position to do that. I certainly know that I have spoken to both my MPs and MSPs in relation to this, and we continue to support wherever possible providing banking services locally. We must recognise, though, that like any other retailer, the banking service does suffer from online activity, and they do have the overheads, etc., that all physical premises have. But I think that we should look at, wherever possible, working in collaboration and perhaps co-location would give opportunities within our economic development portfolio.
I'm very surprised, Provost, that I'm about to have to move a motion to the effect that this Council is... An amendment, okay. Is very concerned, you'll have to forgive me because I'm just thinking up as I go along, is very concerned about the actions of the Royal Bank of Scotland in regard to recent bank closures in the Falkirk Council area. It recognises the contract that has been awarded between Falkirk Council and the Royal Bank of Scotland, and it hopes that the Royal Bank will take note of the concern expressed by the elected representatives, seems to be apart from the SNP of course, to recent bank closures, and assures us that there will be no more in the Falkirk Council area.
First of all, I'll come back to yourself. Have you got a second, first of all, for the motion? Was it the motion now?
I formally second.
Right, okay, thank you.
I did not say that I didn't support writing to the Royal Bank of Scotland. I indicated that there has work already been ongoing in relation to that, and letters sent, and meetings arranged.
So,
hold on a second.
Well, I might be confused as well.
Hold on a second, please. Hold on a second. I have a motion it's now going to be seconded. You can forward the amendment, so we'll go through the procedure first. We've got a motion in relation to what's on the agenda. It's going to be seconded formally by Councillor Alexander. That's correct. No, Councillor Adams, Councillor Alexander, right. Councillor Alexander, you seconded the motion, correct?
Yeah, have I seconded the motion?
Yeah.
Happy to speak to it as well?
You can speak to it as well. And then you come back to your good self and see if you can second it.
Let's
let's no beat about the bush. We are opposed 100% to the closure of branches within the Royal Bank of Scotland, or any other bank for that matter. We've opposed them throughout, and for Councillor Nicholl to try to introduce division in that, I think shame on you. My understanding is that Councillor Nicholl says that the Royal Bank has a hefty interest from the shareholder, from the taxpayer. My understanding is that hefty interest is actually 51% of the bank, meaning that the Royal Bank of Scotland is a nationalised bank. It's in public ownership under the jurisdiction of the Westminster Government. I would have thought that the first people to contact who are looking to stop further job losses would be the owners, those responsible as trustees of the bank, i.e. the UK Government. So perhaps, Mr Nicholl, whenever you're listing your groups of individuals to be contacted, would include the UK Government in that. It's not a paper I read very often, but I assume that the Daily Mail, has exposed the Royal Bank of Scotland in terms of its payment of slave wages in India, and I hope none of us would do anything but praise that particular piece of work. And it's not another thing I'd hear myself say I praise the Daily Mail. Normally I wouldn't believe the Daily Mail if they print the date at the top of the page. But in this particular instance, we certainly welcome the fact that it's been exposed. And we hope that the government again will take action to ensure that that scandal is properly dealt with. Also, Provost, another article that appeared very recently in the Daily Mail spoke of 80,000 banking jobs lost in the UK, courtesy of Brexit. Perhaps Mr Nicholl would like to contact his superiors and express concern about that also, particularly in the impact it may have on our town centres and our branch banks.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Nicholl, just come back to yourself. Could we maybe, because obviously it seems to be that there's an agreement in relation to the paper itself, but if you just want to elaborate, Mr Moody, in relation to... hold on a second, thank you. In relation to your proposed amendment. Fine, thank you.
Yes, Provost, I think the matter that was on your mind at that moment was the question of whether the amendment was necessary, having heard the clarification from Councillor Meikle-John, or whether there was general agreement across the Council that the concerns of the Council be expressed in relation to bank closures.
I think the confusion in my mind was after having heard from Munn's SNP spokesman to hear the SNP suddenly turn into the banker's friend, Provost. But however, thank you. In regard to the very sensible comments that Mr Smale made, that he would take back the views of this chamber, which I thought would be obviously unanimous, bringing to the notice of the Royal Bank the concerns about the spate of bank closures in the Falkirk Council area, and the export of jobs and the payment to workers in India of £1.19 an hour. If that is what is to be conveyed back, then I am content. The Leader of the Council then muddied the waters, but however, if she says quite clearly that she is in agreement with that, and of course the colleagues on the Labour side will also have a view, then I am content, Provost. It's as simple as that.
That's simple.
Yes, thank you, Provost.
I'm sorry, Provost. I thought it made it perfectly clear that I was in support of writing to the Royal Bank of Scotland. That has already, process from our side of things has started, as it has with other banks. But I have no issue with us writing as a council. I certainly know that local members have been concerned and have been proactive in doing something.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just ask if Councillor Nicholl's asked Mr Smale to contact the Royal Bank, would it be okay to contact the bank, the Clydesdale and the TSB? All of it have closed down pretty recently in my ward, leaving Ward 3 with no banks whatsoever. So maybe that would be a wee follow-up on for that as well. So I'm sure Councillor Nicholl will be in agreement with that as well.
Sounds very reasonable, Provost. It's just that it's the Royal Bank that's on the agenda, but no issue with Councillor Gallagher at all.
So we're all agreed that they're coming down to Councillor Spears.
Since there's to be a frenzy of letter writing, can we ask that we also write to the government, and especially the grassroots, the Conservative Party, writing to their Prime Minister to highlight this real concern? I think would be most helpful.
Thank you, Provost. It was just really an observation, but I also have a question for Mr Smale. Basically, I think it's the first time we've actually heard a Conservative member indirectly raise concerns at the actions of the Conservative government, because obviously these matters in relation to banking are, of course, reserved matters to Westminster. But interestingly, over and above this situation, Councillor Nicholl has inadvertently raised the issues or the consequences of what could happen under Brexit. Because when you have free trade agreements, we may have flight of industry out of Britain to reduce or increase their profits at the expense of the British people. And that brings into consequence the notion that we will not be in control of situations in the future. So being in control is undermined by the actions of the bank. But can I also suggest that obviously the Chancellor, being basically the person that has the, shall we say, the responsibility of the Royal Bank under his, shall we say, remit, we should be writing to him as well. But I do agree with Councillor Nicholl. I really agree with you today, Malcolm, that I do agree with you wholeheartedly that Brexit, free trade agreements, could undermine future investment in our banks. But first of all, could I ask Mr Smale, in future, in relation to the investment strategy, will we be hearing from yourself about the consequences of Brexit in future? Thank you.
The item, Councillor Hughes, isn't on the agenda, but it's an interesting one for everybody. Mr Smale.
Yes, of course. You will hear in due course the ramifications of Brexit as it flows through in terms of economic data, and I suspect it's particularly in terms of interest rates, which of course very much drive our borrowing and indeed investment activity. There is, as you will be aware, interim report submitted halfway through the year, as well as an outcome report at the very end. There's three formal opportunities for members to be updated on the position.
The other young lady sitting in this particular part. It was actually, and I'm sure my good friend and colleague Councillor Hughes won't mind me slightly correcting and perhaps saying that he was slightly unfair to our colleagues in the Conservative benches there, because even in the short time in the Chamber I did in fact find that there was another occasion where the Conservatives were gracious enough to criticise their government in the rollout of universal credit being a disaster, and was mentioned in this Chamber that they were particularly unhappy about that. So I think we should highlight that on some occasions they are indeed aware of the disastrous policies of the Conservative government at Westminster.
Thank you, Provost. I feel that the issue of flight of business has been happening for many years, and it's as a result of the increased taxation in Scotland and the increase in business tax opposed by the SNP. Thank you.
Can I bring it slightly back on the report itself? I'd like to thank Brian for his usual financial prudence. Actually, in the report there is a number of items on here about scrutiny
of our finances. I know it's a lot of additional information going through there, which will help the councillors, all councillors, to be able to get more detail on what finance is happening. I know that Brian does an incredible job on that. I don't disagree with the effects of jobs going abroad. As we have seen over the last year, the amount of jobs that have gone abroad as we get closer to March 2019. You'll notice me avoiding using one word. The bank closures are a big concern. It's a loss of facility, it's a loss of people's jobs, and I think just about every area in Falkirk, except for obviously the central area, has affected that. Can I ask Brian one question? I understand that on most tenders that are now given out in public tenders, there is most times a part of that tender which talks about community benefits. And I know I wouldn't expect you to know all the details of that individual tender that has gone out, but can you maybe have a look at that and come back on that? And on community benefits, I'd like to mention the community benefits which Stenhouse Muir Football Club give to the area. And just to remind everybody that tonight they're playing in the League 2 playoff to hopefully get into League 1. And I would hope that the whole of the council, if nothing else in that today, will support that. Thank you.
Provost, yep. I think everybody here will support, on this particular occasion, Stennis Muir, and let's hope they can do it. But I'd like to bring it back to the agenda. I did notice that we wandered off, Provost, the agenda. I counted 12 times there just to draw it to your attention. But I've been here long enough to be here when the proposal to go from the Clydesdale, for the Royal Bank to the Clydesdale took place, and now we're going the other way. So I remember young Mr Alexander saying at that particular time, blaming the British government and saying we should put the money into Dunfermline Building Society. But thankfully, we didn't take that course of action. Anything that's going to affect people's jobs and people's livelihoods in the community, we will support. But through the executive. But what Mr Nicholl is asking for is that we draw it to the attention of the Royal Banks and any other kind of bank you want, that people can be affected if there's withdrawals in the community. We support that. I'll move the vote, Provost.
19-1, Provost. The young Mr Alexander does recall that particular debate, and I recall the contribution made by members on the other side of the chamber, most of whom are no longer here. But the fact is that we proposed some financial transactions with the Dunfermline Building Society, which, like most local building societies, was gobbled up sometime later. We did so because we believe in supporting local business. And I think we were justified in doing so.
Thank you. Okay. I think there's general consensus today.
Provost.
Provost.
Excuse me, Provost. Just clarification on the vote. Is Councillor Nicholl agreeing to write to the government as well as the banks? If so, we can snatch agreement from the jaws of division, I think.
What I was going to ask is because I think we're going to be doing that much right, we need to ensure we know who we're going to be writing to before. But in terms of what's before us, there's an agreement, but there's also been we're not going to go through the amendment.
Provost, is the amendment seconded?
No. Because there's going to be an agreement that we're going to write to whoever, and that's what we're going to clarify just now. Do you still want to put forward?
Well, Provost, I mean, it's got muddied again since the leader of the council was, to be fair to her, quite clear. So I am tempted in regard to Pat's suggestion that I would write to anybody from Her Majesty down to ensure that the Royal Bank faces up to its responsibilities. So I don't have an issue with that.
The situation here is that
I don't remember saying anything to the contrary.
Okay.
And I do believe that Mr Councillor Nicholl is deliberately overstating.
Hold on. No, I said that she was... Excuse me, Councillor Nicholl. This is getting... Something a little bit past a little bit. The issue quite clearly is there seems to be a general consensus in terms of the items on the agenda, except for the fact that we've got a number of people that we're going to draw a line on and we're going to write to.
that's it. I mean, it's a serious issue. I know this can be political, but Mr. Moody, your understanding there. Thank you. We'll take your legal advice on this.
Yes, thank you, Provost. For the purpose of the minute, I understand that there's general agreement with the recommendations in the report. And in addition to that, that the Council write, first of all, to the Royal Bank of Scotland in respect that we are their customer, to express our concern at closures of local branches, but also to express concern about the export of bank jobs and the wage rates paid to those in India, which are referred to in the press article that has been discussed. I also understand there's general agreement that a letter should be written to the other major banks involved in branch closures within the Council area, expressing the concern over those closures, and likewise that a similar letter should be sent to the relevant Secretary of State within the United Kingdom Government.
Okay, is everybody happy with that? Do we agree? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much. That takes us now to item 7, the report is by the Chief Executive, and it's pages 57 to 63 on your agenda. Thank you very much, Mr Casely.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, members are very familiar with the background to this report, which flows from the decisions taken on the 5th of April at the Special Council, and members acknowledged then that there would be consequential changes to the decision-making structure as a result of those decisions taken that day. And I was asked to bring a report to this meeting setting out those implications, including issues around portfolio holders, the make-up and convenership of the scrutiny committees, and any other implications that were identified. But I was also asked to do that having consulted with group leaders. I have now had meetings with each of the 3 group leaders and would want to thank them all for, first of all, making themselves available quickly so that we could get this process underway, but secondly, the constructive approach they took to the issue, which was very helpful. So that being the background, I would refer members to section 4 of the report that you have before you, which is a long and very detailed and I hope helpful explanation of the considerations that were taken into account by Mr Moody and myself as we prepared this report. We hopefully have captured all of the implications identified during the process of consultation with the group leaders, and the rationale, therefore, for the recommendations that are before members are set out in detail in section 4 of the report. Members will be pleased to know I don't propose to go through that, though, in detail. I am aware that members have pressing engagements later today, so I will simply refer members to the recommendations that are set out on the first page of the report and at the top of page 2. There are 10 of the recommendations there which expressly relate to the specific issues that have flowed out of those earlier decisions, but also to section 2.2 of the report, where we recognise that whatever it is members determined to do today, we will have to refer to Mr Moody to make the necessary arrangements to the standing orders which will give effect to those decisions, and to bring a further report back to members in June. So happy to ask members to consider each of those recommendations in turn, and both Mr Moody and myself would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Fitzgerald. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. The outcome of a special meeting on 5th April has left us with a mockery of a decision-making structure, and there's no criticism or reflection on officers in that they have to implement the decisions of members. We've got a clear lack of understanding of a cabinet, coupled with political gerrymandering, that has left us today having to find a best fit around something that is neither cabinet nor committee, it is neither proportional nor democratic. A creation concocted by the collusion of 2 political opposite unionist parties who cannot accept the SNP as the largest party democratically elected. And I take that based on the evidence on the voting record, and if Mr Nicol wants to look at perhaps the overall voting record of him and his party, then perhaps you'll be able to see where that evidence comes from. And I will highlight to Councillor Goldie that minority administration often means you have to look to compromise, but it does not mean that there's any political deal done. And had his party participated in the budget process, then we may well have been able to get to some form of a global agreement, which the people of Falkirk would have prepared, I am sure. So what we have is a combined weight of the power grab of the opposition, designed purely to stymie and strangle the SNP administration, and nothing to do with the best interests of the people of Falkirk or democracy. They've conveniently attempted to sidestep the fact that the structure they've now butchered was their own creation, and that there was we, as the then opposition, recognised that the deal having been done, coalition between Labour and the Tories agreed the role of the administration. We knew what that was, and we also knew what the role of the opposition should be, and we fought for what was rightfully our role at that time. No other council in the country does not recognise the leader of the council as the political leader and convener of the main policy-making body. Perhaps that reflects some of the insecurities amongst the opposition, that they seek to have that power grab. The Audit Commission are very clear about the roles of the administration and opposition, having worked hard over the last year to give them the comfort on the stability, leadership and direction of the Council, and assurance on the commitment to deliver our transformational programme and have a robust financial planning. I know they will be taking a close interest in the Council's governance yet again, and it's likely that we will be subject to further scrutiny from them. So we now have to look at the best fit in order to create a structure that can, in some convoluted way, work with the pretence that it is fair and democratic. So in attempting to do that, as a responsible administration, we're not just about day-to-day decision-making within the Council, but we will look to the future planning and also focus on evidence-based policy development, which is a key role as defined within our standing orders for portfolio holders. Therefore, the political leadership within the authority, in order to progress policy development, will establish a cabinet made up of appointed portfolio holders. The cabinet will have no decision-making powers, but it will enable policy development to take place, to be brought before the Council and Executive. In some attempt to bring some legitimacy to the process, I would move that the following motion. The leader of the Council will have the flexibility on the number of portfolio holders that can be appointed and on their remits, accepting that all responsibilities currently covered will need to be covered. As not all portfolio holders can be represented on the Executive and the Education Executive, and to manage the business of the Executives more effectively, the membership of the two Executives then can therefore be different, and the remit of the Education Executive to be extended to cover the remit of Children's Services. It is not right and proper that a portfolio holder who has carried out the policy development work should be excluded from the diligence process by not being able to move, speak and vote on their report at the Executive or Education Executive. Therefore, memberships of the Executives will be augmented to include, for that item, any portfolio holder who is not a substantive member of the Executive but has a report on the agenda, enabling them to move and vote on that particular item. In order to use the broad range of skills and knowledge, there is an opportunity to increase the pool of members who can sit on the scrutiny panels without prejudicing the decision-making process. Therefore, members of the Executives can serve on the scrutiny panel where the subject matter is not within their remit of the Executive which that member serves on, including any portfolio holder who is not a member of the Executive. All elected members should have the ability to participate and influence the decisions of the Council. In the interest of fairness and equity of opportunity, the Scrutiny Committee should be proportional, based on the membership of the Council and not solely on political groupings. Accordingly, the political balance of the Scrutiny Committee should be 3 SNP, 2 Labour, 2 Conservatives and 1 Independent. In addition, the Council should establish, as a general principle, where there is more than one independent member and places are to be allocated to independents, that these should be shared equitably. By removing the leader of the Council as convener of the executives, this has changed the role of the convener to that of purely a practical role in facilitating the meeting. As a Labour group, who are not the largest group and are in opposition, have taken the convenership of the executives, which is anomalous, as I've already said, the SNP, therefore, as the largest group, should hold the convenerships of both scrutiny committees. In order to maintain the integrity of any decision-making structure which is based on political party proportionality, as dictated by the decision taken on 5th of April in relation to the executive, there requires to be safeguards built in. Should there be any changes in the make-up of the administration whereby its membership is made up of 2 or more groups forming an alliance, it would not be appropriate for the majority of the administration to chair a scrutiny committee, nor have the majority on the scrutiny committee. Therefore, in such event as an administration forming, arrangements for scrutiny will require to be revisited by Council. Business meeting held before Council in line with the previous Council decision. It would suggest that 2 opposition groups should be represented in line with the party proportionality. This can only work effectively provided that alliances, formal or otherwise, are not formed, and there should be no undue pressure placed upon the Provost by any of the parties. With the development of the Integrated Joint Board and the integration of health and social care, much of the current service provision and integration development for the majority of members goes unseen. The work previously carried out by social work services was reported via the Executive and the service-based committees before that. There is now limited information shared with elected members, with the exception of those who are on the Integrated Joint Board or members of scrutiny, which mainly scrutinises performance. Council therefore agrees as standard that the Chief Officer be asked to provide Council with an information and progress report a minimum of 2 times per year, in order that elected members are kept up to date with the changes and developments within the service. Finally, all changes should be adopted as of the next executive meeting, with the memberships of the Executive and Education Executive and any changes to the membership of scrutiny to be advised by close of business on Monday the 14th of May. Provost, this allows the Council to function and function as effectively as we can, having made the recent decisions. By making those decisions and constraining any real significant work to be done on getting a structure that is fully democratic, open and transparent, makes it very, very difficult. And I do believe that this is not necessarily the best fit, and I would urge members to think about what they're proposing when they come forward, because I have no doubt there will be amendments to this. I believe this is workable, but there has to be a level of cooperation and acknowledgement of individuals' roles between opposition and administration. I therefore move, and officers have a copy of their details.
Just before we hand the copies out to everybody, can I ask you for your second opportunity to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I'll formally second that and reserve the right to come back.
19.1, whilst we're getting the paperwork handed out, Provost, can I make one thing again perfectly clear? Miss Meikle-Jones, would you prefer to be called Councillor Meikle-Jones? I apologise if she prefers to be called Councillor Meikle-Jones. I'm more than happy to do that. Provost, just let me finish. Let other people finish. The 19.1 is an old tactic. It's been used for lots of times. We saw it from 1936 to 45 in Europe. And that is, if you keep repeating the same untruth, then eventually people will believe it.
Provost, this is a debating point, not a 19.1.
I'm on my feet, Provost. I'm on my feet.
Not a 19.1, Provost.
No, hold on a second.
I'm now going to come to the point,
Councillor
Provost.
Goldie, can I ask you to sit down, please? Can I ask you to sit down? Can I ask you to sit? At 19.1, I've got it here, as if a councillor considers that he has been abused or unfairly accused of misdemeanour, or having previously spoken on an item of business, some part of his or her speech has been misinterpreted or misunderstood in the debate, or some statement or act has been wrongly attributed to him or her. The Councillor may, with the consent of the Province and subject to the terms of Standing Order 21.6, give a personal explanation, but in doing so shall not interrupt any councillor when speaking, but shall rise only when the previous speaker has concluded his or her speech. I don't think what you said there, to be honest with you, as a 19-1. But no, Councillor Goldie. No, Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Goldie, please take a seat. Thank you very much. And as you've already asked, I'll be doing the same for everybody. We're certainly not going to try and make sure that we accommodate. Thank you.
Recess, Provost. Can we get a recess?
Yeah, just hold on a second. We can get that out.
It's obviously there's a lot contained within this motion. How long do you think that you would maybe need to go through it with your groups? Because obviously
you're asking me for. Thanks for letting me speak, Provost.
Yes, definitely.
But you're asking me for to make a supposition. I don't know how long it will take.
Provost, if I may ask a question about procedure. We are where we are because of the previous decision. Will standing orders not have to be suspended to cover some of the clauses in this? And that's unlikely to happen, I would suggest, after the vote at the last meeting.
In my view, no, Provost. I think the matter is encompassed in the recommendations in the Chief Executive's report. I think it's envisaged that there will be effectively a transitional position between the decision of Council as to how the structure will operate and then the actual amendment of the standing orders. And I don't see a particular difficulty with the decision of Council being given effect to whatever it is at the outcome of this debate and the actual drafting of the standing orders being given effect to in June.
I just think to do things piecemeal regarding decision making is not the proper way to do things. If ever a situation called for a working group to take a measured look at things, this is it, and to take the heat out of the situation slightly. I mean, bar for bar, one has to accept that, but just a thought.
Okay, then we're going to thank you. We will appreciate that those members that are going to put yourself going to the church. Obviously, there's going to be a very large attendance there, and I think.
Come back at 2 o'clock, Provost?
Well, the fact is that the dues of the groups go away, and then we can maybe gauge how things are going, because the last thing we want to do is come back with a very important debate. It could be very lengthy, and to start and one or two speakers and then say, well, where do we need to go to the church? So what we'll do is we'll gauge it and we'll take that and inform this. Thank you very much.
Roberts, can I ask if any other groups have any submission? Because it might have been helpful if there had been an opportunity to share if there had been anything else.
I appreciate Councillor Meikle John want to be helpful. She might assist us when we come back in the debate and be helpful.
Well, the issue quite clearly is there's been a question asked, is any of the Labour or the Conservatives who put any other amendments coming forward?
Provost, frankly, we just, at this stage, we don't know. We've just been handed around the document.
That's the question. Okay, thank you. Recess. Thank you.
We're just waiting on Councillor Murtagh coming back. Thank you. We're going to reconvene now. Before we do, could I just once again just ask that members ensure that their mobile phones are switched off. I appreciate that sometimes it's difficult, especially with a new phone, to work them, but the fact is that if you're unsure of your phone, which I am sometimes, then I'll leave it in the office or I'll leave it out there with the caretaker. Okay then, obviously we're in item 7, decision-making structures, pages 57 to 63. We've had the Leader of the Council putting forward the motion. It's been seconded. There was an opportunity for the two groups, the Labour and Conservative, to go out and look at it in depth. Both of them have done this. And obviously, as you know, we're very tight. We've got a very tight schedule, and we need to ensure that this gets the full light of day. So I would like to ask, first of all, Councillor Goldie, if we could maybe just give us a small overview of the changes we had. That will give the administration an opportunity to dwell on this during the period up until 2 o'clock, where we're going to come back on this one. And then we'll ask Councillor Nicholl to do the same. Thank you, Councillor Goldie.
Thanks for that, Provost. Could I say that it's not normal for me to move a motion or an amendment and then immediately leave the building, but there's reasons for that, obviously, and we will be happy to answer questions after we come back. In saying that, the decision taken in the Council on the 5th of April has caused some technical problems, but the motion in itself was complete and fair on political balance. And that's been emphasised by the fact and echoed by the fact that in West Lothian the SNP did exactly the same. They took it from I understand, they took it from the agenda of Falkirk Council, and I believe that Mid Lothian Council did something similar yesterday. And it's important to note, before I come to that, Provost, because this is an important part of it. Council, this is the West Lothian SNP Group's motion to Council. Council accepts that it is essential for the votes cast by our electorate to be most accurately reflected throughout the Council's decision-making process to ensure genuine local democracy actually plays a full role in determining all decisions made. Council therefore agrees to change the composition of the following council bodies, with a number of seats allocated to each party being determined by the votes cast each for each of our local electorate, and agrees to make a politically balanced council. That's here for you. No doubt the SNP would be in discussions with them as well, giving them some good advice. However, mindful of the time, what we have here, I'm referring to the report from the Chief Executive. Some of these parts were in complete agreement with the SNP on. Obviously, like everything else, there are some things that differ. So can I just take you to the report? And on page 58, 2.1, we agree 1, we agree 2, we agree 3, we agree 4, we agree 5, we agree 6, we agree 7, and we agree 8, we also agree 9, we also agree 10, 2.2, the request, that's approved. And if we go to the background at 3.2, it says the purpose of the adopting the structure was broadly to streamline decision-making and make lines of accountability for the political administration clear. In contrast to other committees of the Council, neither of the executives nor the scrutiny committees were politically balanced. They have to be politically balanced, and that was the reason for following on from the particular thing that we did. We agree the point that's been made about leader to determine which portfolio holder on 4.2, which portfolio holder was a member of the executive. The decision of leader would require to be intimated to the Chief Governance Officer and therefore reported to the Council for noting. We accept that. We also accept 4.3, and that is that the portfolio holder, if you're not on the executive, but you're a non-executive, if you like, portfolio holder, that you can come and speak to the committee. But we do not accept that that member would have a vote, because for that member to have a vote, that would affect the political balance. On 4.4, the part of the issue is, this issue has also arisen whether there be some benefit in expanding the remit of the Education Executive to include services to children beyond education. This may assist in rebalancing the volume of business and would be consistent with the creation of a unified children's service in the Council. It would involve non-councillors participating within the decision-making in the same way as they do for education matters. Now, we agree that partly, but we don't agree the fact that non-councillors would be participating in these particular decision-making process. The other thing that's relevant would be we turn to the 4.7 on page 81, the scrutiny committees. At the moment, there are no independent members on the scrutiny committees, and we would accept the 4.7 number of councillors to be appointed would be 8, and Labour would have, if we take the balance that's there, the table that's there, we would go increase Labour by 1. So there would be no independence on the scrutiny committees. And as I say, that is the present situation, and we accept that. These are the changes we would want to make.
Okay, thank you. And apologies if you had an opportunity during the debate when you come back, maybe just to give us a lecture overview. Councillor Mitchell, would you like to...
Sorry, Provost, could we have that in writing? Because I think that would be helpful to clarify.
Yeah, I'm sure Mr Frawley will manage that. I don't know if he's gone to the funeral or no, but... Well, you know, I've got to say again to Councillor Michael John, let me just say this, Provost. We're going out here to a funeral, we were asked to come back in quick. Had we not had to come back in quick, we would have supplied it in writing. You didn't give us yours either.
Excuse me, it makes sense. Sorry, that's okay.
Provost, I find that extremely disrespectful and also disrespectful in officers.
Okay.
I would have expected a professional job to be done by somebody with experience of Councillor Goldie.
Thank you. Excuse me, Councillor Goldie. It makes sense for an opportunity to everybody to see exactly in front of us what your changes that you're making. I'm sure that that will be the same for Councillor Nichols. If Mr Frawley and Mr Simonson got an opportunity during your overview there, then obviously it's a sensible suggestion. Councillor Nichols, would you like to give us a quick overview?
Thank you, Convener. The Chief Executive, and I certainly will stand corrected if I've not got what she said earlier, my memory fails me, suggested that there were agreeable talks with the three group leaders that more or less came to the same conclusions, and those conclusions were by and large what was in the recommendations. So whilst I'm not surprised that the Leader of the Opposition perhaps finding one or two minor tweaks that do bear scrutiny, and I'm sure we can support that. It is a big surprise to me to hear that the SNP have put a coach and horses through all these recommendations. And again, you know, and I often think back to the previous leader, Councillor Martin, who often made the claim that he could come to an arrangement with Councillor Meiklejohn, but then her group put the kibosh on it. At least I'm happy to confirm that on the occasion that I did a deal with Councillor Meiklejohn regarding the budget, both ends kept their side of the bargain. Right. So, in regard to the papers that are before us, I think, and as I expected when I woke up this morning, that with one or two tweaks, the recommendations would be acceptable to the Council. It's certainly acceptable to my group, but having heard Councillor Goldie make the very valid point regarding the church representatives, I can appreciate that. The one that would have given me concern would be to have deprived the independents of a seat on the scrutiny committee. But however, any concerns that I had in this regard were put to rest when I studied the Council website last night and saw that there was one member who describes themselves as an independent, and that's your good self, Provost, and there's another member who says he's non-aligned. So, on that basis, independent should be 0.265, non-aligned should be 0.265, which, as we know, comes less than 0.4. So it's quite clear that on that basis, the Labour Party does have a higher entitlement to that third place than the independent or the non-aligned person, whatever that is.
So just to keep it straight here, we've got a number of Councillor Goldie's overview has given a number of changes that his group would like to put forward when the debate restarts at 2 o'clock. Are you telling us that you've got a couple of minor ones? What are you saying, really?
As always, Convener, I promise we listen to the debate and we decide what we're going to do. I'm only indicating that to my own mind, I think there are merits in the two proposals that specifically
Provost, first of all, 19.1,
right.
that I think Councillor Nicholl has rose-tinted glasses of the time with Councillor Martin, because at no time was I circumvented by the decisions of my group. I had confidence that my group would be able to take those decisions, but in reality I know that Councillor Martin had great difficulties in getting decisions made with his group. Secondly, there was no deals done at the budget time. The proposals that came forward, the proposals that came forward from the Conservative group were already decisions that had been taken by my own group. I want to make that absolutely clear. The only concession.
Hold on a second. Excuse me.
A point of clarification.
Hold on a second. Excuse me. I said at the beginning, it doesn't matter which side you're speaking. Please give them respect, because what it does is it starts one off and starts the other. If somebody's speaking, you're not happy with it, well, that's unfortunate, as long as they're not being disrespectful to you in the terminology. Please ensure that there's respect for everybody. Carry on.
Thank you. And just finally, Provost, in relation to the item of concession that the administration made in relation to the budget, it was something that both the opposition members had within their proposals. Therefore, I cannot see how that could be considered a deal being done with the Tories.
Okay. 19-1, Provost. The Leader of the Council is attempting to mislead the Chamber. I call a deal when I walked into the Leader's office and said that if you agree to these proposals, we will support your budget and allow it to pass. I think that most people would call that a deal, Provost.
Thank you. Just to make it crystal clear to Councillor Nicholl, as I made it crystal clear to Councillor Munro at the last meeting, a non-aligned group was a thing of the last council. I am an independent, one and only councillor on this council, which you are yourself, I believe. So that makes two independents.
As at last night, he was described as a non-aligned.
Non-aligned. Okay.
Now listen. Thank you very much. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. Those members, I believe, should be up to the church as soon as possible. And thank you. We'll reconvene at 2. Thank you, everybody. I'll let you go out and I'll take a time.
That for those members that were at this service, I think it was a very fitting tribute to the Reverend Jenkinson. And thanks everybody else for their patience. We left this off. We already had a motion moved and seconded. Councillor Goldie then had come in with an amendment. We've all got copies. Do you need extra time then to read the amendment? You need a bit of more time?
I would ask perhaps Mr Moody might be able to tell us where the differences are in relation to our own, just so that I'm clear where the differences are. I see it at item 3 and item 7. Would that be? And 6. Well, I'm looking for a wee bit of clarification around 6.
Provost, sorry, before we do that, can I just formally second our amendment? Yes. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Provost. As I see the amendment, the differences lie, as correctly stated already, in number 3, which is in relation to the status of portfolio holders who are not members of the Executive. There's a clear difference there between the motion and the amendment. The motion would accord the portfolio holder voting rights in those circumstances. The amendment doesn't. In relation to 6, this is essentially an addition to the suggestion or recommendation for consideration in the Chief Executive's report that the business of the Education Executive is extended to include social work business. That is carried forward, but it is qualified by a requirement that voting non-councillor representatives on the Education Executive would be able to vote on education matters only. So they would vote on education matters but not social work matters. And that would essentially necessitate a two-part agenda where the committee would meet essentially in two parts. One to consider education business, where the religious representatives would vote, and a second part where they wouldn't on non-educational business. In relation to Part 7 of the amendment, the version of balance which is suggested by the amendment doesn't incorporate independence into consideration, and that as the consequence of balancing the committee as described. And then finally there's a different approach in relation to the convenership of scrutiny committees set out at paragraph 8 of the amendment. The amendment adopts the suggestion in the Chief Executive's report of sharing convenerships, and that's not the approach in the motion.
Does everybody understand the changes in the amendment? We're all clear? Do you need further time to scrutinise that paper that you've got?
I should have said, Provost, and the amendment doesn't include the suggestion in relation to the integration joint board that is put forward in Councillor Meikle-John's motion, and that was the suggestion that the Chief Officer of the board comes to Council twice a year, at least, to give an update on the activities of the IGB.
What I've been saying is members fully aware of the situation in relation to the amendment, or do you want more time to scrutinise the paper?
I'm happy that we move forward, and I'm happy to make it a response, Provost.
Okay. Well, I'll just bring, I think Councillor Spears has his light on for a wee while. Just maybe I want a technical question.
Yes, thank you very much. I would just like Mr Moody to clarify for the rest of the Council that on my application for the election at this term, it was independent. So the figures from the other side of the chamber, who are very interested in proportionality, will be very keen to see that carried out. And to make it proportional, you need an independent on one of these committees.
I can confirm that in the ballot paper for the local authority elections, Councillor Spears stood as an independent candidate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll go back. Just to clarify, we have a motion moved and seconded. We have got amendment moved and seconded. And thank you very much for your input. And we'll go back to Councillor Meikle-John. Obviously, there's members that have spoken like yourself and Councillor Garner, never had a right opportunity to speak, as has Councillor Goldie, and Councillor Nimmo hasn't had an opportunity, but we'll come back to you, Councillor Meikle-John. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I would be content to accept item 6 around to add to our motion, whereby the voting powers for the non-councillor members are restricted to the education executive part of the meeting, whereby it changed to cover the functions of children's services. Other than that, we do not accept some of the principles within the other aspects, in that we believe that a portfolio holder should have the right to be able to determine the outcome of their work as a portfolio holder and have the ability to vote at the executive. And while that mood for that particular item may well be out with political balance, it would still be an imbalance from the point of view of the administration, and could not, therefore not see that that would actually potentially have a detriment to the decision-making process. I believe that purely political balance based on political party is fundamentally unfair, and that the 2 independent members have the right to be able to participate within all parts of the decision-making process within this council. Similarly, I do not believe that the restrictions should be removed with regard to the convenerships of scrutiny committees. I still firmly believe that myself, or the role I hold, as leader of the Council, should hold the convenership of the Executive Committee. However, that decision was made, and the current process we have with the 6 months rule has stymied the ability to change that today. I think that is fundamentally undemocratic for an administration to be strangled in that particular approach. Therefore, we do not accept, and we will retain our own version of that particular option. I'm disappointed. I would have thought that there would have been universal support for having more information around the work of our Health and Social Care Integrated Joint Board, and I'm disappointed that has not been accepted within this, and I'm sure that there will be members in here that would really want to know more about what's happening, and I really hope that that's an oversight rather than a direct rejection.
I'm going to come back to Councillor Garner yourself if you want an opportunity to come in. You never had an opportunity the last time.
I'll wait to see how is the debate still carrying on from this side?
Pardon? Sorry.
Is there still other people coming in from this side?
There will be opportunities for them as well. Okay,
we'll
come back.
We should follow it earlier, I suppose.
Right.
Councillor Gardner has been asked twice to speak. Twice is negated his right to speak by saying no. So.
Sorry, have I been asked?
No, he just asked if somebody over there wanted to speak. We didn't want to get into the semantics again here. The situation is quite clear as that, Councillor Garner, I was being respectful to you because you were seconding the motion, so I'm coming back to you first before I had went over to those that came forward with the amendment. So do you want an opportunity at this stage to come into the debate?
Yeah, no problem, but usually we kind of go, it's like a wee game of tennis here.
Well, the game's after.
The councillor actually explained this place to me as a wee game of tennis one time,
right.
And he doesn't like it. But yeah, the only thing I'll come in here is on behalf of yourself, on behalf of Councillor Spears, and I find it quite astonishing that the two genuine independents, as you are, not non-aligned independent group, as we said earlier, are getting omitted from the scrutiny panels, because they're basically admitted for the Education Executive, the Executive as well, with the way it stands. So I think that is the one glaring thing for me that is missing out of this motion, the amendment here, sorry, and that's why I wouldn't be supporting that amendment. So that's where I stand.
We're open for debate. I'm coming back now to, I don't see any lights, but Councillor Goldie, do you want to come in at this particular time?
Yeah, just to say, I think I've heard what Councillor Michael John has said. We've got an open mind on it. If they want the agreement on the position with IGB, I think we can agree that. It's not a difficulty for us. We're happy to cooperate, but the positions other than that as stated in the amendment of what we go with.
Okay, fine, thank you. We're just going to clarify, because we didn't want to get mixed up here. You're quite happy to support that. We get that voted down the IGB. So how many areas of Dubai have we still got left there? Just give us a... We just want to make sure, because we don't want to get mixed up.
Yes, thank you, Provost. As I understand it, there are now 3 areas of dispute between the motion and the amendment. That's on the status of portfolio holders who are not members of the Executive, on the political balance of the scrutiny committees, and on the convenership of the scrutiny committees. So that's the matters on which there is now some disagreement.
Disagreement, okay. Councillor Alexander, got your light on, thank you.
Provost, thank you very much. On the issue of the membership of the Executive and the role of non-executive office bearers or portfolio holders, there's a precedent within the Falkirk Council standing orders, and that's the Appointments Committee. The Appointments Committee is proportionally balanced. It has 6 members, but if there's an appointment that's specifically relating to the role of one of the office bearers, or I should say the office, you know what I mean, the portfolio holders, then that becomes unbalanced. But it's been accepted by members, the principle of ensuring that there is as much quality put into the process as possible. And it's very clear that the Appointments Committee takes that precedent. With regards to the local independence. I believe there's a standing order that says that all members should be given the opportunity to speak. The province shall ensure that all members have equal opportunities to speak and to have an input. I see that as a breach of that particular standing order. If we are saying you can't be included because you have the term independent, I see that as a clear breach. I see it as a clear breach of the very principles of democracy and fair play. And it's something that I would ask the Tory members in particular to have a good think about, because you know it's unfair, you know it's in breach of all principles of equality, and you know, if you don't want the reputation of being Labour's B team, then you'll recognise this is a stunt in order to improve the position of the Labour group within these committees, to give them an extra place that they're not entitled to. They already have a place on the executive they're not entitled to, as per proportionality, just simply through this gerrymandering exercise. I used the little time that we had at lunchtime to phone West Lothian and get some clarification of the motion of West Lothian. And yes, the SNP, who are the largest party in West Lothian, but who are frozen out by the alliance of others, the SNP proposed a system of proportionality. They did so without requesting the head of the council, the leader of the council, to be removed. They did so without excluding any groups within the council, and they were defeated in the vote. So, if anything, what West Lothian example shows us is that Labour have a face for us and a face for West Lothian, because while proportionality appears to be an issue in Falkirk, it's certainly not in West Lothian. The bottom line is, Provost, that the amendments that have been put forward are straightforward. They're inclusive, and they recognise the principle of everyone having an equal say. And that's how it should be. Can I just say, it hasn't been touched on so far, but I'm looking forward to the establishment of the Cabinet, and I look forward to serving in that. I believe we have some good news stories coming on. I believe that we have some projects and programmes that the portfolio holders are working very, very hard on, and I think that I'm looking forward to seeing these come to fruition. To wind up, Provost, the structures, I believe, or the decision rather in the structures to effectively remove the leader of the council, the only council in Scotland that has done so, the only council in Scotland that doesn't have the leader of the council as its chair of its main committee, and that was done just to show that it could be done, and it has to be for a better reason than that. It has to be for the betterment of the people of Falkirk District, and I think we saw in the last meeting of the executive that clearly is not the case. So, Provost, I would hope that in particular we'll see some open minds from the members on the opposite side of the chamber, and we'll see some fairness brought back into the process, some accountability and some democracy as well.
Thank you for your input. Thank you. I'm moving along. Councillor Reid.
It's not really taking part in the debate. It's asking a question of fact. In May 2017, the allocation of places to the scrutiny committees was 3 SNP, 2 Labour, 2 Conservative and 1 Independent. However, as they stand, it's 4 SNP and no Independent. I just wondered how that came about. If somebody could remind me, did the Independent not take up a place, or were they not offered a place? It seems inconsistent with what's been said. It's just a question of fact. I'm not trying to be clever.
No, it's a salient point. Maybe try and get clarification first. There we go.
For the 2 scrutiny committees, Provost, the standing orders provide that they are divided for administration and for opposition. So, as the independent member within the administration, Councillor Spears, sits or sat on the executive at the time, he wasn't entitled to be a member of the scrutiny committees. So there are 4 SNP members who took up the administration half of the scrutiny committee, and as I understand it, the opposition members are divided to Labour, to Conservative.
Does that answer your...
Okay, thank you. Okay, then, number 1,
thank you. I'm slightly puzzled by why, Councillor Garner graciously was waiting for further information, further input on your motion here, and amendment, and I'd quite like to hear what the other members on the other side would have to say about this, in order that we can have a proper debate and respond, rather than just this is our position and the lack of clarification about the thought that's gone into it. I echo the sentiments of my colleagues on this side, that this seems to be fundamentally unfair, particularly in respect to the independent representation on the committees. Councillor Spears and Councillor Buchanan now have no opportunity at all to participate in an equal fashion with all other members in this chamber. They've been elected by their constituents on the basis that they would be regarded in the same esteem, held in the same. There's nothing in standing orders or for the public to say, oh, well, if elected an independent, they won't be able to take forward and represent in the same manner. For us to put in our structures an artificial barrier which basically segregates and creates 2 tiers of member in this chamber, I think is absolutely disgraceful and an affront to democracy. Now, Councillor Spears, as we had it in the last committee meeting, I'm not sure what it's called now, the Cabinet, the Executive, at which the Chief Executive confirmed it was actually supposed to be formed as a Cabinet. At the last meeting of the Executive, I sat as portfolio holder listening on the sidelines and watched the situation where Councillor Spears could come to the table, not move the paper, speak to a paper, be invited to speak to it, but not move. And I think that that's fundamentally creates a democratic deficit, and we should, and it's contained also within the SNP's motion, that there should be that equality, that if you're presenting a paper, if you're responsible for the development of that policy with officers and taking that forward, that you should have the opportunity to move that, you should have the opportunity to vote on it, in order that you are part of that accountable structure. And it's completely illogical to remove that. It won't, in fact, do anything to the balance in terms of the votes. Councillor Alexander has already alluded to the situation which exists in appointments, which allows this to take place in the Council. And it just seems, frankly, childish that we would deliberately exclude that, and that opportunity for portfolio holders who have worked hard with the officers on a paper, take forward their responsibilities, to be excluded from being able to move and to vote, and to have to ask somebody else around the table to say, could you formally move that? Seems to me to be, disrespectful. I'm disappointed that that's been removed. I would ask, as my colleagues have, that members give this some thought. Think about, we cannot change, I would change tomorrow the situation which we passed last month, which has made this executive a non-functioning body, non-democratic body, but we cannot do that. So we have to make the best of it. This is not making the best of it. This is making a mockery of democracy, a mockery of the quality of people in this chamber. I'd ask you to look at it seriously and reconsider.
Anybody else before we go to the Councillor Blackwood?
Provost, just very quickly to expand on what Provost Reid did ask. Colin quickly explained why Councillor Spears isn't on a scrutiny committee. Can maybe explain how you're not on a scrutiny committee? You're the other independent.
Sorry, Provost, I didn't hear what Mr. Councillor Blackwood said there.
Mr. Moody explained why Councillor Spears isn't a member of a scrutiny committee. You're the other independent councillor. Can you explain how you're not a member of a scrutiny committee?
I'll come back to Mr. Reid on that one. I understand the question.
Thank you, Provost. I return again to the point that 4 are reserved for the administration, 4 for the opposition. And I think even on any application of proportionality with 17 members of the opposition and one of those being an independent in the form of Provost Buchanan, there wouldn't have been an entitlement to one place. So as I understand it, the agreement between the opposition groups and the independent member who forms part of the opposition was that the places went to the Conservatives and Labour group members.
Provost, can I ask the Director of Law, the legal officer, he said there were 17 members. Can you break that down for me?
Just a point of clarification you're asking for. Is that what you're asking for? Point of clarification. You can answer that, Mr. Moody, and then we're going to Councillor Coombs and then Councillor Bowes.
As I understand the matter, Provost, there are 13 members of the administration and there are 30 members of the council. So those members who are not members of the administration are members of the opposition, which gives 17.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coombs.
What's to say? Supplementary question.
Thanks, Provost. Again, it's probably a bit of clarification from Mr. Moody. Mr. Moody, can I just check my understanding? You stated that the independent member of the administration took his seat on the executive as part of the administration. Okay, well, if that's the case, why could he then not take part in the scrutiny committees as part of the administration?
Mr. Moody, no, listen. These are good. They're good. They're all valid questions. Let's get answers. Everybody get an opportunity here.
The bar on sitting on the scrutiny committee is not being a member of the administration, it's being a member of the executive. So you can't be a member of the executive and the scrutiny committee. Councillor Spears, as a portfolio holder, sat on the executive and accordingly couldn't be part of the scrutiny committees.
But now, as we've changed,
do you want me to explain it? Well, I'll explain it very clearly.
Excuse me. We've got an opportunity.
Would it be possible for the independent member who took his seat on the executive as an administration member to do the same now with the new structures, to take his seat on the scrutiny committee as an administration member?
Yes.
Thank you.
Again, it's keeping this clarity thing, and I took Councillor Reid's point, but I understand that the numbers that they would have spoke about then was when the scrutiny committee was the counter to the executive when we were under a 9-3 balance. But what was argued for and what was voted through for last month was for proportional representation, and that obviously was successful last month. This is a change now to the scrutiny panels themselves, so therefore they have to be proportional as well, which actually, as has been shown, there is 2 independents. That's obviously pretty clear. So am I correct on that point?
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Bowes is correct that the structure of 4 administration, 4 opposition was designed particularly to deal with the issue of the administration being accorded a large majority within the executives. And that's a matter particularly addressed in the Chief Executive's report, where she does raise the issue of the scrutiny committees becoming proportional in a similar manner to the executives as was decided by the Council at its meeting in April. The report highlights that there are 2 variations of proportionality which would be open to the Council to adopt. The motion adopts one version of that, which gives a place for independence within the proportionality. The amendment adopts the approach which was adopted for the executive, which is to base the matter on political groups, and that is the basis on which the amendment proceeds. So Councillor Bowes is correct in his supposition.
Okay. But that was actually the point of clarification. If the amendment is carried as opposed to the motion, then independent members would not be able to sit on the scrutiny committee because it's based on party.
Has Councillor Meikle-John just closed the debate?
Thank you. In answer, Councillor Coombs, I don't know, were you at the last council meeting, the special meeting, or were you absent? I'm not sure. It's very... Well, I'm trying to clarify. If she wasn't here, then... Very respectful. I'm just asking were you in attendance or not. It was very clear that after last month's debacle, that an independent did have a place on each of the scrutiny and the executive. I believe you didn't choose to take up your position on scrutiny, but I certainly chose to take up my position on the executive. That is quite clear under proportionality, that two independents make up 0.96 or something of the vote, which gives them a place on each of these committees.
Thank you, Convener. From what I've heard, it's been a long day, but I now trust that Councillor Spears will end the ambiguity about his status and remove the description of non-aligned from the Council website. In regard to this, Provost, you and I have the distinction here of being members of the opposition, 17 members of the opposition here. You, with your great knowledge of the Planning Committee, wasn't able to obtain a seat because of the proportionality. I gave up my seat to allow you to take up the committee and bring to the Planning Committee your great knowledge and insight. I still wonder whether, to pick up, I think, what the direction that Councillor Coombs was going towards, whether if the SNP are so concerned about proportionality and concerned about the fate of the independent stroke non-aligned member, if they, and perhaps it may need a tweak to this motion, that would allow the SNP to give one of their places to Councillor Spears if, as I say, they are so concerned, although, of course, I doubt very much that they are genuinely concerned, other than Councillor Spears providing a bit of lobby fodder.
Provost, could I just get one minute and then that's me finished?
It was just a point of clarification on this point, Provost. Councillor Colin Murray answered in response to Councillor Coombs a few moments ago about that question whether Councillor Spears, as an independent, could take up an administration place on the scrutiny committee. But, as is pointed out, this motion doesn't allow that. Neither motion is actually, and that is proposed here, would enable that. You said that he could, but he wouldn't. This is not named administration, this is named SNP. And the point about, in our motion proposing that, is that it's about proportionality and the equality of positions. So can you clarify that Councillor Spears would in fact not be able to sit on the scrutiny committee?
Okay.
It's not a member of the
hold on a second. Right, we're going through a difficult period here, but the fact is that we're going to see an end result very soon. Mr. Moody, could you just clarify that young lady has asked first? Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I'm grateful for the opportunity offered by Councillor Murtaugh's question there, because I think I may have sown the seeds of some doubt unintentionally. Both the motion and the amendment, as Councillor Murtaugh properly says, do not depend on the notion of administration and opposition. Those were aspects of the current decision-making structure. Both the motion and the amendment now move to notions of political balance, albeit there's dispute about how that political balance can be established. So, in terms of the motion, there would be an independent place on the scrutiny committees, and yes, Councillor Spears would be able to take up one of those places were the motion successful as an independent. The issue of taking up on whether he's a member of the administration is neither here nor there, because that distinction flies off as from the date of this meeting. Were the amendment to be successful, there is not a place on the scrutiny committees for independents. So there wouldn't be an option for either Councillor Spears or yourself, Provost, to take up such a position. The question I was attempting to deal with was the issue of the fact that Councillor Spears was a portfolio holder and whether that would continue to have a bar on him sitting on a scrutiny committee. No, it wouldn't, because he's a portfolio holder who's not a member of the executive. But for that opportunity even to arise, it would require the motion to succeed rather than the amendment. I hope that clarifies matters somewhat.
Okay, thank you. In answer to Councillor Nicholl, I take no lectures on the lobby fodder for somebody who was in a joint administration with the Labour Party for
Councillor Spears,
years.
you're on in a 19-1.
Yes.
And if you're abused or unfairly accused or misdemeanor, haven't previously spoken an item business.
Yes,
so what, could you maybe
fodder.
just clarify exactly what you're up for? Just tell us.
I'm clarifying them that I am not lobby fodder. I am part of an administration. I decided when this council was formed and there was no overall majority that some of us had the guts to stand up and take and grab the metal and said that this council needed firm leadership and it needed to be run. We didn't run away for the responsibility of running this country, this council.
Just to clarify, Provost, just to clarify one thing, and it's an issue that I didn't take this time, as I said I would wait. The issue of a member not being on the executive every member here, if you're not on the executive, you have the ability to come and speak at the executive. So there's no difference there. There are some committees that if you're not a member of that committee, you can't speak. So there's no difference here. The issue here is, can members speak at committees and can members not being allowed to speak at other committees? It's been like that since time immemorial in here. If you're not a member of some committees, you can't speak, but you can ask to go forward and speak, but you can't vote. Anybody here can go along with the executive under the old system and say, I want to speak to that report, and you'll be welcomed along. But when it comes time to vote, you can't vote on it because the numbers are set. That's what's straightforward.
Thank you, Provost. What we still have is a hybrid. It's neither one thing nor another. And as a result, this is not going to work very effectively. I hope that members will seek to make it work effectively, but for the right reasons. They will look to make it work for the benefit of the people of Falkirk and not to feed their own particular agendas. We still have members who are going to be participating that really should be able to vote on whatever, whatever policy initiatives they bring forward. We should still have everybody that is able to be included within the decision-making of the Council. We should still have the political leaders be able to speak at on behalf of the Council and do so with the authority and not have to kowtow to any opposition. And I look forward to being able to take my Cabinet forward. I look forward to being able to work with my portfolio holders and officers and bring forward our political agendas as we move forward. Because that is something that cannot be prevented from happening, and that's something that my group will be committed to as we go forward. It's disappointing that members will not support the motion that's come forward. I think it gives us a best fit to a hybrid model. I can see that very shortly, potentially, that we're going to have to revisit some of this, and indeed, as Mr Moody works through some of the standing orders that support this, I think further issues could arise. It also just flies in the face that 18 months it took us the last time to look at a structure. We're doing it in 2 months this time, and that's not really a best fit, and it's not what Falkirk Council deserves, it's not what the people deserve. It deserves so much better. I'll be disappointed in the outcome of today if we can't actually vote for something that is democratic and is something that people can actually participate in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr Moody, just want to clarify again the amendment, I think, to make sure that everybody's clear and concise what they're going to be voting for here. We've got a motion, moved and seconded. We've got an amendment. I would just like to maybe highlight the changes in the motion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Provost. We have the motion moved by Councillor Meikle-John and seconded by Councillor Garner. We have the amendment moved by Councillor Goldie and seconded by Councillor Nimmo. And the matters on which the motion and the amendment differ are in relation to the status of portfolio holders who are not members of the Executive, the political balance of the scrutiny committees, and the convenership of the scrutiny committees. Provost Buchanan.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Motion.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Councillor Balfour.
Motion.
Councillor Binney.
Motion.
Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs.
Amendment.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meikle-John. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears. Provost, there are 13 votes for the motion, there are 17 votes for the amendment, and the amendment is carried.
Okay, that takes us to item before we go forward. Did everybody receive a copy of the supplementary agenda? Okay, thank you very much. Number 8 is appointments, and the report will be coming forward by Mr Moody. Thank you, Mr Moody.
Yes. Thank you, Provost. And may I begin with my apologies, first of all, for the necessity of issuing the supplementary report, the issue of the appointment of the Deputy Convenership of the Pensions Committee. I'm sorry to say was overlooked at the time of preparation of the report, but there is an opportunity now to fill that omission. So the report, Provost, asks Council to deal with a number of appointments and processes relating to them. The first relates to the independent convenership of the Audit Committee, and I think members will be aware that Roseanne Davidson has served in that post since 2010, but she's intimated that she is standing down, so it's necessary to establish a procedure to appoint her successor. The report suggests that one option would be for a 3-member panel to be formed, and that could be formed from one person from each group if that was agreeable to the Council. There is a suggestion also that Council agrees that the post holder can serve a maximum of 2 terms. And the purpose of that suggestion is simply to keep the freshness of perspective that an independent convener can bring to the Audit Committee, and to maintain that freshness rather than allow someone who may serve for repeated and successive terms. The second appointment which the report addresses is a second member for the Local Negotiating Committee for Teachers, formerly the Negotiating Group for Teachers. And as the report sets out, the practice had been for the members of that body from councillors to be made up of the convener and vice-convener of the Education and Leisure Committee, but at the point where the Education and Leisure Committee was succeeded by the Education Executive, there was no longer a vice-convener. So the position has been taken by the portfolio holder without there being a second elected member to accompany that person. So there is an empty space on that body for Council to fill. The third appointment is essentially a proper officer appointment. There is now a statutory requirement that the Council formally appoints a data protection officer. The Council requires to appoint someone with expert knowledge of data protection law and practice, and we're extremely fortunate within the Council that we already have someone with that degree of knowledge and expertise in the form of Wendy Barber, the Information Governance Manager, who as we speak is hard at work running a training course on the General Data Protection Regulation. So Council is invited to appoint that post holder to the statutory office of Data Protection Officer. And lastly, in the supplementary report, we have the vacant position of Deputy Convener of the Pension Committee, for which nominations are requested from the Council. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you, Mr Moody. Before I bring the leader in, could I just say at this time that Rosanna Davison was appointed Convener of the Audit Committee in March 2011, and I think it would be pertinent for the Council to thank Rosanna for her service and contribution, and I'm suggesting that we're right to express the Council's thanks. Is everybody in agreement to that? Okay, thank you. Councillor Meikle-John.
I was just about to say exactly the same, Provost, and I think we should really express our thanks to Rosanna that she has served since 2008. She's been a very good chair of the Audit Committee, and she's been a very fair chair, and some people may think that audit is not terribly exciting, but she very much embraced it and has done us proud during her time of service. But in turning to the recruitment process for the new chair, I would formally move that we do establish an appointments panel with the composition of 3 members, 1 from each of the main political groups, and that the appointment should be for until the end of this council term. I would also support the view that's been put forward to maintain the independence of the convenership, that any convener should only serve for 2 terms, as in council terms, having to be reappointed for the second. And of course, we should not be asking anyone, particularly a layperson, to carry out duties without offering them reasonable expenses, as the post is not remunerated. So I'm happy to move that for the appointment of the Chair of the Audit Committee. In relation to the Local Negotiating Committee for Teachers, I would move Resources Portfolio Holder in Gary Bowes to fill that vacant position. And I think that's going to be a key role as we move forward in our modernising workforce and entering into discussions locally with our teachers. Data Protection Officer, data becomes far more important now than it ever has. We hold so much data within the Council, and some very sensitive data, and it's something that we have to manage effectively. I know that Wendy Barber has done a tremendous job so far, and she is leading on the compliance with the GDPR, and I'd be more than happy that we look to appoint her as Information Governance Manager, the Information Governance Manager as a Data Protection Officer. And Pensions Committee for Vice Convener, we have no nomination.
Thank you, Process. I'd like to send the nominations, Councillor Bowes and sorry, thanks.
For that, Chair, I would just like to, on the Local Negotiating Committee for Teachers, move Councillor Alan Nimmo.
Convener, I would like to second Councillor Nimmo.
Are you happy with the nominations for that protection from Ms. Barber? Happy with that?
Well, I'm not on the first page.
Thank you, Provost. Can I echo the leader's comments about Wendy Barber? She's a first-class officer and an ideal choice for this position. In regard to the appointments panel, at this stage, are you asking for nominations for that?
I think those could be handed up later, Provost, by group leaders.
Okay, I'll just hand you mine just now. It's Councillor John Patrick. Turning to the extra paper, John Patrick was for many years excellent convener of the Pensions Committee. He would have been a great choice to have continued in that role. A confident administration seeking genuinely to reach out beyond their own depleted numbers would have recognised that. However, it was not to be. As such, convener, we also have no nominations for this position. The SNP have chosen to plough their own furrow, and they will get no support from us to fill places in the future. Thank you.
Clarifying as well that you're happy with the appointment of Wendy Barber with that application. Okay.
Okay, then does anybody want to come in this debate, or just going to go to the vote? Just to clarify, this will need to clarify again where we are. I think there's only one area where we're saying the vote. That's item 3, negotiating committee. We have your good self, sir, been nominated, Councillor Bowes. And we have, I think it was Councillor Goldie that moved. Councillor Nimmo. Okay.
Yes, Provost, that's my understanding too, that there is general agreement to establish the appointments panel with 3 members, and that the post holder be limited to the maximum of 2 terms, to appoint the Information Governance Manager as Data Protection Officer. There are no nominations for the Vice Convener of the Pensions Committee, which leaves us with number 3 that requires to be determined, which is the second nomination for the Local Negotiating Committee for Teachers, for which there are 2 nominations, Councillor Bowes and Councillor Nibble. So that's a straightforward vote, Provost, where each member has 1 vote, either for Councillor Bowes or for Councillor Nibble. Okay. Provost Buchanan.
Councillor Nibble.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Balfour. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears. Provost, there were 14 votes for Councillor Bowes, there were 16 votes for Councillor Nimmo, and Councillor Nimmo is duly appointed.
Thank you. That takes us now to item 9, which is execution of deeds. Who's going to read the report 68-71? Agreed? Agreed.
Promise.
Yep.
Just a bit of clarity regarding one of the, on page 71, that's the substation Falkirk Crescent, Bowman, is actually, Falkirk Crescent is actually Madison. Just for a bit of clarity. It'll be changed.
That takes us now to item 10, which is notices of motion received. 3 stand referred to the executive. They are B, C and D. The fact is that as the provost, following consultation with the leaders of the 3 groups, that I've decided that we would be hearing the one from Councillor Alexander and the one from Councillor Coleman, and the rest will be referred to the executive. Okay, Councillor Alexander.
Sorry, Provost, perhaps you can maybe explain to the rest of the members your reasoning with regard to the motions going to the executive and the difference between the one that you have chosen to come to council. As you, I believe that all 4 of the motions are pertinent to the whole of the council area, and as such would have expected that it would have come to council to allow all members to participate. So I think it would be helpful if you could explain your reasoning.
Explain yourself. I remember maybe a few months ago when I had 2 which I thought were very pertinent that I had asked, and I was really disappointed that they were put to the executive. But as Councillor Goldie says, everybody has an opportunity to go to the executive. But we don't have any further discussion on this. Councillor Alexander,
Sorry,
thank you.
Provost, could I have a point of clarification? I think if you don't, it's actually from a point of view being constructive and helpful that, as Councillor Meiklejohn has said, one of these has been chosen to go forward, and to understand the difference, for us to be able to, as members, to understand, putting forward, particularly as new members, what the difference is. It would be helpful if you could explain what the difference is. I'm not asking you to change your decision or explain, but I think I would also like to note in that the composition and the nature of the executive, as we've discussed at length today, is fundamentally different to that in which it was before, on a number of fronts, and that whether you, as Provost, as is your discretion and understanding orders to make this decision, have amended the kind of criteria which you would look at in order that now that the executive is on proportional political balance, but on no other measure balanced or a reflection of diversity or a reflection of the geographical spread of this council, whether you have looked at these in light of allowing a better spread of members to participate, because as Councillor Meiklejohn says, these motions do relate to the whole council area. In fact, some of them relate to the entire country, if not the entire world. And I would like to understand your decision so that I can better put forward motions in the future.
Provost, can I just say that the Provost has ruled, when the Provost rules, that ends the business. There's no further
Listen, I've explained the situation. Councillor Alexander, you want to come forward with your motion? Thank you.
Yeah,
no further debate on that issue.
It's called scrutiny. The Provost, it's been obvious since 2007 that COSLA are playing a greater role in consultations with government than it's ever done before. Recently we've seen through the leaders' meeting of COSLA a Labour amendment which were taking £4 million off our early years settlement figure being defeated, thanks in part to the work of the current leader of the council. We've seen £250,000 additional money through the leaders' fund for roads repairs from the Scottish Government. Again, the formula came through COSLA, and we were able successfully to argue for the maximum. We've seen through the police board, or the police conveners board, the issue of the police's position with regards to TTROs clarified to our advantage. All of these decisions have been to the advantage of not just Falkirk Council, but the people of Falkirk District. During the recent executive meeting, education executive, the issue of membership of the board that COSLA established to look at the educational items, which has delegated powers, incidentally, was discussed. You'll recall, the Provost, at the very outset of this particular administration, the Labour and Conservative members, without collusion, knowing what each other was going to bid for in terms of the 4 boards, and 2 Conservatives and 2 Labour were elected, even though these were the remit of the portfolio holders within the administration. I was surprised to note when I was reading the agendas and minutes of the educational board that Falkirk Council had been unrepresented for all 4 meetings of that particular board. I raised the issue at the Education Authority, and I was promised a response by the leader of the opposition, who chaired that particular meeting. I would get the answers to that sometime in the near future. Still waiting, Provost. Now,
19-1, Provost.
Now, Alan Nimmo was his individual involved. Now, Alan Nimmo is not the worst attender. In the last session, there were 14 meetings for the Children and Young People's Committee, as it was at the time, and Alan attended 8, which made him the current top performer within the Labour group. Since then, we've seen John Patrick attend 1 meeting of the board that he was assigned to, out of 4. Looking back over the previous term, we had the representative on the Community and Wellbeing Committee. I won't name him because he's not with the Council anymore, so it wouldn't be fair, but of 12 meetings, 0 attendance. We had the Development, the Sustainability and Economy Committee. In other words, the Economic Regeneration, Economic Development Committee of COSLA. Councillor Dennis Goldie was our delegate. 12 meetings, 0 attendance. We had the Health Committee set up by COSLA. Again, I won't name that individual because she's not here. But we had 13 meetings, 2 attendances. John Patrick sat on the final board. 12 meetings, 4 attendances. The point that we're making is, if you're going to have power, you're going to have to accept responsibility. There's no responsibility being demonstrated by this opposition. Administration is perhaps a Freudian slip. It was an administration leading up to the last elections. The people of Falkirk deserve better. The people of Falkirk deserve full representation at these bodies, particularly as these bodies become more and more powerful in terms of the liaison with the Scottish Government on all issues, including funding. So that's why the motion is worded the way it is. Because if these members can't perform their duties, they should step aside. And if we're going to do our jobs properly as elected members, if they're not prepared to do their duty, we make them step aside. Because, as I say, the people of Falkirk deserve better. So, Provost, I'd hope that this motion will meet with the favour of the majority of members of this authority, because I'm sure they'll recognise the importance of holding any member of this authority who holds a position on behalf of the authority, that the proper scrutiny and accountability that should come with these processes and with that responsibility. Because at the end of the day, the losers, not the individuals, the losers are the people of Falkirk District. And that's something that we cannot stand and step back from and ignore any further. So with that, Provost, I'll formally move the motion as is outlined, and look forward to receiving the support of all members of this authority.
Thank you very much, Councillor Alexander. We got a seconder. You got an opportunity. We got a seconder first.
Yes, Provost, I would like to speak to the motion.
Yeah.
I think it has to be highlighted that the COSLA boards are not just sounding boards, that they actually are decision-making bodies, and they do actually influence the implementation of legislation into policy that is devolved down to individual local authorities. Therefore, there is significant power within those particular boards, and therefore it's important that we are represented within those. There's a number of areas that we can benefit from by making sure that we do have proper representation there. There's a good learning opportunity as you're able to hear from other authorities exactly what they are doing, how they're doing it, how they're implementing it, and there's a sharing of good practice. There's also the ability for us to actually showcase what Falkirk's doing and be a good ambassador for our authority. And in some areas we are a leading light, and I have to say that right now is mainly down to the involvement of officers within some of the boards within COSLA that are doing a tremendous amount of work. But the fact is that members who are not members of the administration, who have chosen to take these particular roles, have to be called to account. They have to represent the views of this council. They have to represent the political direction, not their own political party and not their own political views, but the role of this particular authority. There has been no contact with any of the representatives of the boards, with any of the portfolio holders during this time, and furthermore we find that there's been a complete disregard for the council in the non-attendance. It has to change. It has to change. This is too fundamental, particularly as we go forward with some very significant policies that are going to be of a great benefit to the people of Falkirk and for our children, in particular around the early years. There's a lot of work going on there, and it doesn't look good to hear our particular representative actually ask questions that they should have known the answers to had they attended the COSLA boards. It's actually quite embarrassing to actually do that. So I'm more than happy to support Councillor Alexander's motion. It puts a formal process in place. It allows that should any of those representatives not actually be able to attend, a substitute, which is the default, is the portfolio holder, as it rightfully should be in the first place. And it also enables a feedback mechanism to the council and an ability where there are some crucial decisions, particularly around funding, to be discussed with the administration.
Okay, thank you. I'm bringing in Councillor Patrick at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. It might appear to be rather an unexpected change when I say that in many, many ways I entirely agree with what Councillor Alexander has said. I can only, of course, support my own position as a representative of COSLA, and I do regret very much that Councillor Alexander did not perhaps take the opportunity to speak to me before he made his remarks, which referred to my own attendance, which I accept was not satisfactory. It must, however, be accepted that I did, on 2 out of the 3 occasions when I was unable, for reasons which were valid reasons, to attend, that I did in actual fact make sure that I attended, that a substitute attended in my place. So the council were indeed represented. And indeed the only fault that I can personally find with the details, recommendations here is that I cannot in actual fact see it being appropriate that that in all cases the person who cannot attend, the person who attends as a substitute should be a portfolio holder. In my opinion, that is not necessary, and that I still would reserve the right to appoint an appropriate substitute.
Thank you for that.
Yep, thanks very much, Provost. A couple of things. If I hadn't been moving this amendment, I would have done a 19-1 myself. I'm bringing forward an amendment, yeah. It's going to be a direct negative to the motion, Provost, and I think it's important that we keep what we currently have in place. This last came to the Executive back on the 2nd of December 2014, where it was voted on. There was a motion put forward and an amendment, and the motion was carried. There is a reporting mechanism back from COSLA and for other outside bodies, because the minutes are published in the volume of minutes. So there's a record of who actually attends and who actually is there, obviously. So that's not an issue. But I was named by Councillor Alexander. I think it's very important for people in glass houses. You shouldn't throw stones, because there's other people in this chamber who haven't been attending meetings. Sitting on my right-hand side, we have an administration SNP Children's Services spokesperson who is supposed to be the joint chair of the LNCT. She's only attended one meeting in a year. Now, that's about as bad as you can get, and that's been confirmed by officers. But I'll move the amendment as what we have in place at the moment, Provost.
Just now, did you say? Direct negative. Oh, okay, have we got a seconder? Hold on a minute. Have we got a seconder? Okay, just...
19-1.
Wait, excuse me. Thank you. Just to clarify the situation, Councillor Nimmo has moved his amendment in the direct negative. It was seconded by Councillor Goldie. We're now going to Councillor Murphy. You've got a... Okay, carry on. Thank you.
Councillor McHugh, portfolio holder for education.
Yep.
The meeting that Councillor Nimmo refers to, there was a mix-up with dates prior to December's dates, and that's why, and there's been various discussions over the dates to include my diary, and that is why now I will be attending all these meetings.
Okay, thank you for that. What it does show, though, it does show that there is, excuse me, it does show that there is situations that develop for all councillors, that for reasons, it could be illness, it could be problems with the family. There are so many different reasons that a councillor cannot go to a meeting. Anyway, I'm going to, I think it was Councillor Nicholl first, sorry, and then Councillor Colley. Is that right? Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Provost. Well, the older you get, Provost, time seems to go very quickly, because it doesn't seem that long ago, although I suppose it must have been 10 years or so, since members of the SNP were pleading with Councillor Patrick and I to support plans to withdraw the council from COSLA altogether. So little did they think of it as being important. Now here we are saying that it's so vital to attend these meetings, but I do accept the situation has changed. Councillor Patrick highlighted the position in regard to himself very eloquently, as you'd expect from John. I'm not sure if there's a bit of mutiny in the ranks, though, Provost, because from my own part, I think that there was very little in this to commend it. I do accept that to formally do 5 to replace, when an elected delegate is unable to attend, a substitute chosen by the delegate will be appointed. And we've heard that that's the procedure that Councillor Patrick has been following to date. So I certainly think that that is worthy of mention and perhaps ratification by the Council. As for the rest of it, I just think that it's all just done in different ways, as we've heard from Councillor Nimmo, and I certainly will be supporting the direct negative, but I do hope that people will be gracious enough to accept the small addendum, if necessary, that it formalises the current state of play, I suppose, to some extent, that a substitute is always available for members who, for whatever reason, is unable to attend meetings, and certainly not the portfolio holder.
Well, I think that's the point of clarification I was looking for, because I'm aware that at Council we voted on...
Provost gave dispensation to sit down in the previous meeting.
Have I just been addressed as the one, with a pointy finger? That's not acceptable behaviour, Provost.
May I finish what I was saying? Yeah. Okay. It was on the point that we voted on the members who were going to be on the COSLA boards, but at no point I remember us voting the ability to have substitutes. I just wanted some clarification on that.
That's what I'm asking for.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Provost. I think Councillor Colley is correct that there was no specific decision taken at that time in relation to substitution, but equally I think it's also been a long established practice within the COSLA boards that where there is an appointed member, that member may arrange for a substitute to attend on his or her behalf. That is the position as I understand it at the moment. It's open to the Council to take a different view and to restrict the matter in the way suggested in Councillor Alexander's motion, which would be the default position of the portfolio holder. But that's an issue for Council to determine.
It's just for Councillor McCluckie. It's just that when Provost Buchanan became the Provost, he actually said people could sit down when they were talking, and that's what's happened here. So it was the Provost that actually said people do not have to stand now.
We'll get an apology.
There's a situation. Okay.
So do you have an apology then?
Right. Let's move on. Let's move on to important issues here.
I apologise. I never picked that up. It's always been courtesy stand. I mean, somebody has a medical duty.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. I think the position is that because we've got such a serious problem with the sound system in this building, I had stated that it was easier for people that were speaking to the microphone to be sitting down, because people up the back had been complaining on more than one occasion that they couldn't hear elected members speaking. But we'll bring Councillor Nicholl back in a point of order, and then Councillor Gardner. Thank you.
I thank Fiona for asking the question there that got a degree of clarity, as always, from Councillor Mr Moody. It's been a long day for us, and I've got a pounding headache. If the Leader of the Opposition was gracious enough to accept his direct negative, a small addendum, just clarifying that it is legitimate for any member to choose a substitute of their choice to replace them at any meeting, then I'm sure that Councillor Patrick would be delighted.
You just asked me to speak. You just well, since I'm on my feet, sure, I'm going to speak just to help, trying to help things out, Provost. It's just Provost, it's just to try and help you.
I'm okay. I'll let him go first. It's fine. Game of tennis.
Thank you. Well, as clarification, Provost, Mr Moody eloquently said Mr Nimmo has moved the direct negative, which in effect means the existence, the status quo. Quite sure everybody here knows that. Mr Moody eloquently said that the custom and practice, in effect, for the last Humpty Dumpty years has been that if you can't make a meeting at COSLA, that you appoint your own representative to go as a substitute. Therefore, that ties in with the direct negative, because the direct negative is what happens at the minute.
Okay, thanks for your clarification. Okay, then we're coming. We'll go to you.
Thank you, Provost. That's fine. It's a point of clarification, and it's directed at Councillor Patrick here. And I'm reading in front of me here the minutes of the meeting of the Environment and Economy Board from the 4th December 2017. And I see you gave your apologies there, which is fine and well. But I don't see any substitute in place. Did you say earlier on that you had sent substitutes to the other meetings of the COSLA board? And if so, is this minute wrong?
Thank you, Provost. Mr Gardner is Councillor Gardner is completely correct.
that I did not appoint a substitute on that occasion. The reason that I got rather got out on that particular occasion was because at that particular time I was particularly actively involved in the budget negotiations and omitted to make sure that was the case. But certainly for the other two where I was found wanting, I did in fact follow substitutes. And I can confirm to you that it is in fact stated practice within the COSLA committees that the substitutes are welcomed.
Thank you, Provost. When Ellen said, and we were talking about this issue of substitutes, I understand that the practices has been pointed out in terms of it's been a convention that a substitute could be nominated or appointed by the person who is in fact the elected person by this council to represent this council on that board. Councillor Nichols said it should certainly not have to be the portfolio holder. I can understand the logic in having anyone who would be more appropriate to go in the first place, as Councillor Meikle-John said, than the portfolio holder, and why it should rest when the actual position is elected by this council, that it should just be that person who can decide who is appointed. That doesn't seem consistent to me. What we're trying to do is actually put in a mechanism here to enable scrutiny. There might be, and I take the point that there might be good reasons why a member misses the odd meeting or even consecutive meetings. What this motion does not say is that that member should be automatically removed. What the motion says is that that member should voluntarily step aside, or a report provided to Council in order that we can all judge whether that is in fact that there are valid reasons. And that seems to me to be entirely consistent with the kind of scrutiny that we should have, that we should be entitled to expect, that if we appoint a member to go to COSLA to represent the views of this council, that we are entitled to know why they've not attended, and we're also entitled to know the feedback from them. I don't see anything here which is automatically going to say if somebody missed for family circumstances, illness or otherwise, they'll be removed without any kind of recourse. It doesn't say that at all. And I cannot understand the objection to having a level of scrutiny that helps us to understand why those things happen in the first place. But I would like to try and understand from the opposition why it is they don't think a portfolio holder is the most appropriate person in the first place, but would be the most appropriate substitute. And given the kind of situation where we have had, I myself attended a COSLA briefing and board on criminal justice recently, in which I took part in the first half of a conversation about policy development, which will be picked up at the COSLA board meeting in order to be developed further. I cannot take part in that. I cannot have the thoughts or the debate or the understanding to the representative, and this creates a mockery of the whole situation. I would think that the portfolio holder is the most appropriate substitute. This formalises a process to make a substitute in the first place, and it also brings accountability to the people who are representing this council. I cannot see any logical reason why it would be opposed.
Councillor Alexander, you want to wind up? Oh, is it Councillor Balfour?
No, it's myself again. Another point of clarification.
Just a point of clarification.
Another point of clarification, and it's directed again, I'm afraid, at Councillor Patrick. I've went further back here as well. And at one of the meetings that he didn't attend, and I'm not getting on him for not attending, he could have valid reasons for not attending, but yet again there is no substitute. I'm wondering, because I can't see any substitutes to the board at all, and I'm wondering if Councillor Patrick is actually getting confused between the board and the convention. Would that be correct, John? Would you like to clarify that, because there's no substitute here again?
You will not, I presume, be suggesting that I'm deliberately trying to mislead you.
I'm suggesting that maybe you're getting a bit confused between the board and the convention. That's all. The only thing I'm trying to say.
I don't think I am.
Excuse me. Now listen. I think we'll move on to Councillor Alexander. Well, the fact of the matter is, you're sitting there with an iPad. You're getting information first hand. You're getting information first hand. And it's difficult when you've got it in front of you.
Provost, he was at the meetings or he wasn't at the meetings. He needs to know if he's sent a substitute or not. He told the committee here he did send
And
substitutes.
it is documented that Councillor Patrick has provided a substitute for convention.
4th of September, 4th of December.
No, not really. I just want it to be understood, and I presume accepted in good grace, that I did not attempt to mislead them. I believe, in actual fact, in one of the people I was referring to was Councillor Councillor Harris, that he, in actual fact, represented me at a convention meeting, and to that extent, I do apologise.
And the wind up, please. Thank you.
I'm really disappointed, but not surprised, that we've got a direct negative. Because direct negative implies that there's nothing positive in the motion, and everything is in the garden is rosy at the moment, with the levels of attendance that we have, 0, 0, 2, 3, 0. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to anybody that has an interest in accountability, has an interest in actually doing the job. And that's what it boils down to, doing the job. Alan Nimmo said that I shouldn't throw stones if I live in a glass house. Then you throw a stone at somebody else's house. If you've got some that you want to throw a stone at my house, Alan, you're welcome to try. The Councillor Nicholl made it very clear that it was anyone bar the SNP in terms of representation of Falkirk. The portfolio holders are the individuals who shouldn't be substitutes. They should be first choice. We got that from the Chief Executive and from the President of COSLA. It is the local authority's representative spokesperson that should be on these boards. Once again, Provost, we have a rogue authority in Falkirk, an authority that wants to do things differently from the other 32 local, or the other 31 local authorities. The fact is, Provost, that what the motion is introduce accountability where there is none. Introduce openness and transparency where there is none. And that cannot be a bad thing. I just fail to recognise at all an argument that says that 0 out of 12 attendances is somehow in the interests of the people of Falkirk District, particularly when COSLA were the body that is responsible for so much. Councillor Nicholl's recollection, his memory, seems to be fading. It also seems to be playing tricks on him. No time did we beg the Tories for anything, nor would we. You were told at umpteen times through your colleague, Councillor Buchanan, at the very beginning, and through others, that you weren't part of the administration. If we'd lost that vote, we'd have lost that vote. We'd have accepted it with good grace. But there was certainly no begging of the Tories for anything. So we can have a situation whereby you can have accountability, you can have the type of transparency we should have as an organisation, or you can continue to be Labour's B team.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm just going to ask for clarification from Mr Moody in terms of the voting process here in relation to the direct negative and any dubiety surrounding that as an amendment. Thank you. That's okay. Councillor Goldie, come on.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The vote in these circumstances is simply a vote for or against Councillor Alexander's motion. The form of a direct negative isn't in strict terms an amendment, but it amounts to the same thing because it's an indication of a lack of general agreement, in which case the motion is put to the vote simply for or against. So,
point of information, Provost, or point of clarification, it wouldn't be generally accepted that is an opposition to the general consensus. It would be against all aspects of the motion. Surely, if it's direct negative, it's against all aspects of the motion.
I think that's exactly what Councillor Nimmo said. and I think that's, in my view, Provost, a clear indication of a lack of general agreement to the motion, and in those circumstances, in accordance with Standing Order 20.11, the matter goes to the vote for or against. Provost Buchanan. Against. Deputy Provost Ritchie. For. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander. For. Councillor Balfour. For. Councillor Binney. For. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears. Provost, there are 13 votes for the motion. There are 17 against. The motion falls.
Okay, thank you. That takes us now to the last item on your agenda. It's a motion brought forward by Councillor Coleman, closure of the Forth and Clyde and Union Canal. Councillor Coleman. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you for referring this motion to full council. Colleagues, the motion comes to full council at a time when members are contemplating the newest iteration of the local development plan, a plan which focuses in part on the canal corridor, a feature which, as we know, is a backdrop to some of the new proposed developments in terms of housing and commercial developments. And we're fortunate that we have not one backdrop, but two canals in the district which feature in most of our wards. The canals within the Falkirk area play an important role in terms of delivering the Council's Tourism Strategy 2020. And the reopening of the canals has contributed to tourism and business, leading to attracting significant investment over the years, such as the Kelpies and, more recently, the Rosebank proposals. They are also a feature of our recent and not-so-recent history, from the commercial arteries of the Industrial Revolution, commemorated by those Kelpies, to a unique feat of engineering, the marvel of the Falkirk Wheel, and, of course, the canal's infamous use by the body snatchers Burke and Hare. Falkirk District's past is entwined with the canals, but the future seemed a wee bit less optimistic. In my short time as a councillor, I've had constituents raise concerns with me about the lack of fencing along the canal banks, the lack of bins on the canal banks, and more crucially, that the canal bridge at Bridge Street and Bonnie Bridge can no longer be raised to allow taller boats or barges to pass by. However, I have recently been informed by Scottish Canals that the bridge can now be operated safely as a one-off or very restricted operations using cranes and other lifting mechanisms. Until Scottish Canals can provide long-term repair for the canal bridge at Bonnie Bridge, it will only be operated once, and that was last Sunday. This is an immovable canal bridge as an example of the unacceptable state of the canals across the district. The canals are a valued community amenity, beloved by ramblers and cyclists and dog walkers alike. But they're rapidly becoming an embarrassing eyesore. A recent FOI has informed us that so far this year there have been 35 cancelled holiday bookings, and I've also been recently informed that the new QE2 canal at the Helix, opened last year by the Queen, has already silted up, and the boats entering from the Forth have been using the original entrance, the entrance lock further up the Carron. It seems unlikely at the moment that we will see many boats coming into the canal at the Kelpies now that that route is closed. So I would urge members across the chamber to support this motion to make Scottish Canals sit up and take note that the current situation is simply not acceptable, that we need to ask them to meet their statutory obligations to keep the canals maintained and open for use, with functional bridges and working locks, to make sure that the Forth and Clyde Canal is truly coast to coast, and if members are minded to do so, if they could write to Richard Miller, the Director of Infrastructure for Canals, and express their dissatisfaction. Thank you.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Provost, for using your insight for your love of the Falkirk area and its landscape in referring this motion to full council. Thank you, Councillor Coleman, too, for your debut eloquent address on a matter that affects me every day. I am very fortunate. I live next to a canal and see its beauty in every season. I am sure all of us can appreciate the value of our canals. No doubt every one of us has walked on a canal path and marvelled at the way we feel being next to the water. Can you imagine it now? The sun is shining and you feel part of the community. You look all around, away from the buildings. Swans and ducks are slowly skimming in the grassy, watery habitats. You pass walkers, mums and dads and prams. Polite cyclists pass you. Time seems to stop and you could walk forever. Well-being is being felt instantly. Waterways are multifunctional assets. Yes, assets. And here in Scotland we should be very proud. We should be optimistic and invest. We have the famous Kelpies and the Falkirk Wheel, destined to bring more and more tourists here. But we must support all the links for the intertwine. The Millennium Link restoration was to bring the canals back to life from city to city and sea to sea. Exceptionally important as they bring visitors and they're valuable to our economy. They engage our communities and lay foundations for the outdoor places we know so well and proven to increase our well-being, health and prosperity. An urban renaissance can grow alongside the canals, improving housing stock and generate employment. I have only been a councillor for 1 year and each day I'm still learning about the marvellous volunteers we have in our area, and one day I was invited along to the Seagull Trust boathouse. I was happy to hear the joy that many of the users experience from going out on a canal boat. This charity offers canal cruising for those with special needs of all ages. So I am sure we will all agree how valuable in so many ways canals are in our communities. With this in mind, I ask you all to support this motion with all your heart. Keep canals alive, keep people well for now and in the future. Only yesterday I received an update from the communication manager at the Scottish Canals. Though some of the concerns have been addressed, we need complete assurances in writing that meets all the concerns for all our 9 wards in the Falkirk Council area. I totally agree with Councillor Coleman. We must write immediately to Richard Miller, Director of Infrastructure at Scottish Canals. Thank you for your attention and please support for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. I was glad to see this on the agenda today because it is topical just now and it is a subject that we're all passionate about in this area. It's an interesting motion and I agree with the ethos behind it. The formation of the Millennium Link brought a great deal of hope to Central Scotland and small businesses were generated in its wake. Some of those small businesses are now at risk and some have fallen by the wayside. Scottish Canals is a public body that only came into being 6 years ago, and at that time it inherited, just like the Trust did, a lot of assets in need of significant amounts of repairs, and their main stakeholder and funder is the Scottish Government. As can be seen if you look online at their external auditor's report from last year, their funding from the Scottish Government in real terms has fallen, and therefore Scottish Canals are looking to generate more income in order to fund core Scottish Canal activities. That, however, isn't as simple as it sounds. In reality, over the last year, their income has fallen by £2.5 million, whilst at the same time significant investment is needed into lots of areas within their portfolio. And at page 22 of the External Auditor's report, it says Scottish Canals' long-term financial plans will continue to be shaped by the aims and objectives of its shareholder, the Scottish Government. These plans will be significantly impacted by the outcome of government spending reviews and subsequent budget allocations and decisions taken both by government ministers and the board. And in Scottish Canal's corporate plan from 2017 to 2020, it states that their total annual revenue is currently in the region of 18 million, but to operate and to do what they need to do, managing the canal safely, it's actually going to cost between 21 and 23 million at today's prices. So the demand for investment and expenditure will not be static from year to year, and in some years it will significantly exceed that amount, while in others it might not be as much. Both capital and revenue expenditure will be required, and even with the current level of grant and aid, they have to therefore increase commercial income. By at least, this they have to do by at least 30% if they're confident of long-term financial sustainability. Last year, Scottish Canal spent over 2 million on major infrastructure works, compared with 1.5 million the year before. So we can actually see that they are doing their best to try and keep up with the demands that owning those older assets can bring. So far, it's clear from their annual report and from their corporate plan that their income-generating activity is not where it should be, and their funding from the Scottish Government is falling. So the second paragraph of the motion is not accurate. We do have some great volunteers along the canal, and we have loads of organisations who are trying to bring the canal to life and keep it vibrant. As I said at the start, I agree with the ethos behind the motion. However, I do have an amendment, and that amendment is: Council values the work of volunteers and organisations all along our canal and waterways. We appreciate the work that is ongoing to regenerate and promote businesses in that area. Council thanks Scottish Canals for the long way it has come in 6 years to establish and grow its business profile within difficult financial constraints, alongside an asset base that requires a lot of maintenance and work. Council asks the Scottish Government to look at the core funding given to Scottish Canals and adjust accordingly so that those bridges can be effectively repaired and the canal network can be fully utilised by boats again. In addition, funding is required to put in a drop-down lock at Bonnybridge and other areas of concern so that communities are not inconvenienced as they sometimes can be just now. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you.
Councillor Blackwood.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, in seconding this amendment, in 2012 the Scottish Government took over the running of our canal network from British Waterways. Scottish Canals were established assuming responsibility and accountability for maintaining the network. Scottish Canals have a statutory requirement as navigation authority to keep the canals in full working order. However, this can only be achieved with financial support. Barges are currently stranded between Bonnybridge and Twecker, where the two bridges aren't operating. Many of these barges are for hire and presently cannot be used, resulting in loss of much needed income for their owners. Having spent around £80 million at the turn of this century to bring the canals back into use, I believe it is important these bridges are operating as soon as possible to ensure a long-term future for the canals. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you. Thank you very much, Provost. I live very near the canal, actually fairly close to the bridge itself, and it's been an issue for some time, and a number of repairs have been carried out on it. I wonder if I might ask a question of the Director of Development Services, if that's possible, around the use of the road. I'm just wondering if there's been any assessment on the increase in traffic on that road, particularly the heavy lorries from the extension of the recycling plant, because there's things like recycling bulk concrete and demolition waste, and it's a much bigger enterprise than it used to be. And I wondered if there was any assessment, but also a future assessment, because if repairs are carried out and it happens again, I think we just need to get a full picture.
Thank you, Provost. I don't. I can certainly find out for members if there has been any recent assessment, and obviously there was quite a lot of work done at the time of the Millennium Link reopening for assessment purposes for that very reason, but I'm not aware if anything has been done since then. I can certainly find that out. As I say, we are very close partners with Scottish Canals, as you know, so I'll make sure that we are in touch with them to see if perhaps doing a further traffic study would assist them in their efforts to reopen the bridge.
Yeah, Provost, I fully support both the situation and the ethos behind the Councillor's motion. Also, I support my colleague across the corridor, across the bench here. Can I say that I've never at any time in my life lived any more than probably 100 yards away from the canal. So I've seen it in its heyday with the fishing boats, etc., and then I've seen it fall into a state of disrepair. Then it had its resurgence. And I need to be fair about Scottish Canals. Scottish Canals are at this minute discussing a major improvement and a major investment at Loch 16 in Calmar. So it's not like they're no investing in the area, but to be fair, it's just not acceptable if people can't use the canal with your boats, because boats are major beneficiaries of the canal, just like us people who walk it. But again, if they're not getting enough money for the Scottish Government, then they've got a problem. So I think too we need to be saying to the Scottish Government, look, divvy up here. We can't on one hand criticise Scottish Canals because if they don't get enough money, and at the same time we say we would do more here with the many things that we like to do, but we've not got enough money, no matter where it comes from. So I will be supporting the amendment, but I would like to congratulate young Councillor Coleman on bringing forward his motion.
Thank you. I would also like to congratulate Councillor Coleman for his bravery in bringing forward something, and perhaps his brass neck also, for bringing forward something which clearly is the responsibility of the Scottish Government. The Scottish Canals, as we've heard from the mover of the motion, is a 100% public corporation owned entirely by the Scottish Government. Councillor Alexander made the fair and legitimate point this morning regarding the UK Government shareholding in the Royal Bank of Scotland, but it is nothing like the control that Scottish Government have over Scottish Canals as a public corporation. Provost, you will well recall, as I certainly do, your years in the wilderness on this council. Like Churchill years before you, you spoke things which have turned out to be sensible in the long term. And one of those things that I always remember you going on about at the time was the need not for a bridge in Bonnybridge, but for a drop lock. Now, you have become correct over time again, and no more than this latest situation shows the wisdom of your idea all those years ago. Now, of course, this is not new. I had a sense of déjà vu when I read Councillor Coleman's motion, because it is remarkably similar to questions and notices of motion that one of our local MSPs, Alison Harris, has put before the Scottish Parliament in recent months. Indeed, I would suggest that Councillor Coleman also read Alison Harris's article in the Falkirk Herald a month or so, which raised these very points which he's trying to establish today. So, congratulations to him for bringing forward a legitimate concern, but there is no getting away from the fact, Convener, that the canals are in the situation they are because they're being shortchanged with the Scottish Government, and I'm glad that Alison's motion recognises that. It is also the case that when the canals were built with the bridges, it did cause problems and tailbacks and that, which, again, I well remember you going on about. So I'm very pleased that Alison has put in her motion requesting that funds be available to a drop lock at Bonnybridge, because I believe that, as you did all those years ago, Provost, it is only by the provision of a drop lock at Bonnybridge can everybody be happy. The boaters get the use of the full length of the canals, and motorists aren't held up unduly when trying to get about their daily business. So I congratulate Councillor Coleman for bringing it forward. I congratulate Councillor Black for improving it no end and putting it into a form which my group will be happy to support today. But in all modesty, Provost, I know you are a very modest man, you highlighted this 20 years ago, and I'm almost sorry that not even I believed you at that time.
Thank you, Provost. There's always something that comes that there's a big bag Scottish Government, but of course we're not concerned about the continual cuts to the Scottish Government from Westminster. Therefore, the pot of money to share out is ever decreasing. Fact is that Scottish Canals, as such, was only put into being 6 years ago, and it has established a good business profile and it has been against the difficult financial constraints. But you know, they're partners in Falkirk. They're one of our key partners. We have a growing tourism industry, the third highest tourism destination in Scotland. That's something that we should be proud of, and our canals are a key area in that. My approach would be that, yeah, let's speak to the government, but no, let's not beat them up. Let's speak to them, say to them what we want to do, because it's in their interest as well to encourage visitors to Scotland internationally. But you know, we do it in a partnership approach, and I don't have a particular difficulty with going to the government and saying, you know, this is a key area throughout particularly central Scotland, because that's closest to us in doing that. But I think we have to be realistic, and that, you know, Scottish Canals are growing a business. They are looking at commercial operation. They're looking at developing small and medium-term enterprises. They're looking at developing social enterprises, so that we don't always have to rely on public funding. And that is the area that we should be working with them to develop further. But I think we should speak to the government. I don't think we should be going and beating them up and demanding. And I fully appreciate that there's a requirement for a drop block on Bonnybridge. But let's start the discussions in the hope that we can actually take them somewhere and actually deliver. But the only way we're going to do that is if we actually work together. Thank you.
The final point that Councillor Meikle-John just made is a key point. It's what's got the Lock 16 proposals to the stage they're at the moment, is working together as partnership. The fact is that, yes, we would like to see more money spent on the canals. We'd like to see more money spent in local authorities. We'd like to see more money spent in the health service. If Alison had got her way in the budget process, we'd have £120 million less to spend in these services. So I don't think we can take any lectures. With regards to the motion... Could you
clarify that, please?
Sorry?
Could you clarify, Promise, could I have some clarification at 19.1?
Well, I apologise, I didn't mean Alison Black, I meant Alison Harris.
Oh, that's fine, okay.
Is that a wee schism in the partnership already? We as an authority of the previous administration took the decision, we went along with it with regards to the issue of resources and particular assets that were transferred through the Empowering Communities programme. In other words, we were looking out with the box to try to resolve a funding problem that the whole of the public sector has at the moment. 10% reduction in the Scottish budget does mean that there's going to be cuts. It's the reality. So what we're looking for is partnerships. The partnership has got, as we've said already, as far as we've got with the Lock 16 proposals. And partnerships will be what drives the whole process forward, not just for us, but for the agencies such as Scottish Canals. These are the bodies that we need to be on board with. These are the bodies that we need to have on board our ship, if you excuse the pun, in terms of the community planning process, and in terms of the ability to match fund in areas where we previously would have perhaps looked to take full responsibility for. So partnerships are the key to this particular proposal. I don't see a need for the amendment, to be honest. The motion is quite clear, it's quite concise, and I hope that we don't have an amendment for the sake of an amendment.
Thanks, Provost, and I apologise to the Deputy Provost who I said I wasn't going to say a word today, came what I mean, and so I apologise for that. However, in listening to the debate here, which has been excellent about the canals, we're all saying the same thing, beautiful thing to get, and we all support the use of it and the history of it. And Councillor Coleman spoke very eloquently, as has been said. As I say, it's maybe new to the Council, but talking like that, I hope we hear him speaking more often. However, one word he said caused panic and alarm into the big man here, and I had to get on my pins. and the word was fence. He said fences. And I'm just thinking, you know, where are we going? He's surely not going to talk about putting fences along the canal so that the ducks and swans can't get in and we can't get into fish and big unsightly fences. And that is Loch Lomond next. We've got to put a big fence around that. I mean, so please just clarify me that I'm getting all worried here about nothing. And you didn't intend, right, that as your group over there talking about putting big fences down the canal, please.
I don't mind, Provost. Okay.
First of all, I'd point out to Councillor McCluckie that swans have wings and they can actually fly.
No, after he knows them, these are you. No, after he knows them.
I may say it's refreshing to get a motion that has benefits to the public. So far today we've looked at our own navels, and in my case it's not a pretty sight, I can assure you. But and I think it's indicative of the fact that we haven't got to grips with the constitution of the council properly, and it calls for a thorough examination of the structures. And perhaps that's something a new chief executive, with due deference to yourself, Mary, might take up as one of his first actions. However, back to the canals. Like most people have claimed, I grew up at Loch 16. It was a very idyllic childhood surrounding a canal. Until one day, of course, our family moved through the fence from us, and there were two twins, but I'll leave it there. That was another story. Yeah. So yes, it's really sad to watch the canal deteriorate into the state it is, and the deterioration is very quick on a canal. It can happen within a month, within a year, and the sooner action is taken, the better. I think the amendment enhances your motion, Councillor, and should not be voted against. And I hope you would accept it in the spirit in which it was intended. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I would echo the comments that others have made in terms of praise for Councillor Coleman in bringing this forward, but also the comments which Councillor Binney made in her own excellent style that she has to give us the positive view. I hope very much that I'm one of the polite cyclists that she's referring to who uses the canal path. I am very polite. I'm not blessed with having a particular part of the canals in my ward, although I do use them regularly, other than to clarify that not to start a war on any side, but that the council election maps do put the Kelpies within the ward of myself and Councillor Bowson, and indeed there was another side. But I've been advised by other members on this side that is in fact completely incorrect and just an anomalous error, but perhaps we have a little bit. However, I would like to generally support the motion. I think that positive case of the health and wellbeing element, which Councillor Binney referred to, as well as the economic arguments, can't be overstated. And we should, as Councillor Black was saying, congratulate the volunteers who have been out, who help to maintain our canal sides, as indeed our volunteers do along our foreshores, along our rivers, and yet another example of where our volunteers are making a contribution to our community. And I think that I would like to put that on record today, not having had the opportunity to speak to the other motion, but that recently there have been significant and outstanding efforts by members of our community, including along the canals, to clean up our environment, and we should be all as a council very grateful to them and put that on record.
Provost, I did wonder if the move of the amendment would consider amending the final paragraph to work in partnership with the Scottish Government so that we can look at working effectively around the bridges. The Council seeks to work in partnership with the Scottish Government around the funding given to Scottish Canals and around the Scottish Canals so that the bridges can be effectively repaired and the canal work can be utilised by the boats again.
Maybe I could come in at this stage. If there's anybody else wanting to come in, I'll come back to Councillor Black in a minute. But I think the last point in our amendment, I think is the most important point, and that's the drop loch. And I'm going to give you I'm going to bore you to tears for a few minutes in relation to the canal. I was brought up at the side of the canal. I live at the side of the canal just now. Our house is at the side of the canal. I lived in the lockkeeper's house where the bridge is for a number of years before I got married. And I remember when the Millennium Initiative came up, that I walked the length of the canal to profile it with Dennis Canavan to ensure that the funding came forward. The canals, the opening up of the canal has been absolutely tremendous in terms of the past and the links to the core pass. I thought your good self spoke really tremendous. Delighted for Councillor Coleman to bring this up. But the issue is that although Councillor Nicholl, you maybe thought was maybe a wee bit of patronising, he was only speaking the truth. And the truth is that when they came forward with the initiative for the Millennium and they came forward with the plans for the Bonnybridge area, I'm going to show you some headlines for the Falkirk Herald in 2001. You can go back on the internet, you can see it. I mounted a campaign at that particular time called Ban the Bridge. And what happened was we had numerous public meetings. We had thousands that signed a petition because I knew that because of the technicalities, because of the fact that it was going to take about 7 minutes to lift up, that our communities were going to suffer, and they did. On a number of occasions, the bridge at Bonnybridge has been non-existent. It's caused major problems and major headaches. I told them at the time, and it's not a case about me, but I'm just saying it was me, told them at the time for the meeting that the people didn't want a bridge, they wanted a drop loch. And that's how it's important that Councillor Black retains the drop loch in her amendment. Because of the fact that and Councillor Coleman, who I'm delighted that you brought this forward, 3 months ago, before all these problems started, my brother had a boat down at Bowling, and I came down for Bowling with him on the boat. He lives at the side of the canal at Camlin there. And we only got an hour in, and what happened was we had problems because of the weed and the growth, and the boat had to be stopped, and then eventually we had to get a crane and get the boat taken out, and that's one of the areas that you've been looking at as the state of the canal itself. The fact of the matter is that we've got, as you say, we all got well, I don't know who everybody got it, but we got an email, and I was quite sort of reluctant to look at this because it said that it's from Nicola Sturgeon, but it's Nicola Sturgeon at Scottish Canals, and she actually highlights the issues, and as Councillor Coleman has stated, it's only been opened once, and that was to allow other boats that had been stuck there for a considerable time to get them off and away. It's been a total nightmare, and it's going to be continued to be a total nightmare until something's going to be done about it. Cycling, walking, whatever you want, it's wonderful on the canal towpath. Councillor Blackwood and myself, and no patronising any of the two of us, but we had been working with the Scottish Canals 2 years ago to get them the extra funding to ensure that the towpath was regenerated right through for the Bonnybridge area, and then they got funding again, which we supported, to do up to the wheel. We realise, as you said, Councillor Binney, that it is a major issue in terms of health and well-being. And as far as the leader has said about sustainable tourism, it's been there. The issue about fencing, I can understand what Councillor McCluckie is saying, because I remember one time there was a fatality in the canal just up to where I was staying. And the fact is that the family had come out that day after the person had sadly fell off and drowned. And one of the issues that they had come up with that time is that they wanted a petition started to get fencing. Now, the canal was built in 1790. The fact is it's never been fenced, and it should never ever be fenced. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter what you say, the fact that it's utilised, everybody realises that there's water in there. But in fact, going back to the mover, the amendment, I would say it's up to your good self, Councillor Black. But for me and the people of Bonnybridge who suffered continually, because what we've had is we have got 2 schools, we have most of the employment that's left on what we call the west bank of the bridge, and the amount of times that we've had problems with that bridge, you can see it. Drivers hit by canal link delay, council raises fear over lifting bridge. That bridge should never ever have been put up in the first place. And for a Millennium Initiative, it was a backward step. It's a backward step when what you do is you jeopardise a community and you cause disruption. There were tailbacks by traffic when the bridge is up as far back as Camlin and Denny Cross, especially at times when it's schools coming out or schools going in. The issue for me is, thank you very much, Councillor Coleman, for bringing this forward. Everybody said exactly the same. It goes so far. But in terms of the communities, and I'm not just talking about Bonneville, I'm talking about Twecker, that if you want to go from east to west on the canal, then the Scottish canals will need to get the funding to ensure that the bridges are there at the moment are removed and there are drop blocks there. Thank you very much. Councillor Black.
It was just to quickly say, Provost, on reflection while you were talking, I think that I would prefer the wording to stay the same as it is just now, because it's simple wording. It isn't inflammatory in any way, it's just stating the facts. So I think, I don't think there's anything wrong with the amendment being taken as it stands.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coleman, would you like to thank you?
Thank you, Provost. With the waves of congratulations coming my way from the opposition, I was minded to waive my right to sum up, but there's a few points that have been raised, so I shall address those briefly because I share Councillor Reid's dislike of nasal gazing. Mine is equally unpleasant. So on the point of the amendment, I was minded to accept the amendment if it was a more collegiate phrase used, hence the group leader's comment. Today we have circumvented the Westminster Government's responsibility for banking as the majority shareholder, and here we have a comment on the Scottish Government's majority shareholding of the canals. So I'm afraid I'm going to take a mirror entrenched position from Councillor Nicholl. And I should also address his comments. I admit to reading a newspaper. I do. I also admit to paraphrasing the work of Jamie Hepburn, MSP, in this area. More importantly, on the point of fencing, this is really neither here nor there. I apologise if I've caused any confusion. The fencing is just simply a constituency case that I have where there is some dilapidated fencing, which is already there but not in good repair, and constituents asked me to look at getting it reinstated. It's not my intention to fence in the swans in any way, sorry, just to reinstate the fencing. That's all I have to say on that. It's a fairly uncontentious motion. I hope we can cease nasal gazing and, oh my God, I'm just going to stop saying that phrase, and do something for the benefit of the community, which this clearly is. Thank you.
Thank you for your input in your motion, sir. Okay then, we'll go back to Mr Moody just to clarify the position, and thanking you.
Yes, thank you, Provost. We have the motion on the agenda moved by Councillor Coleman and seconded by Councillor Binney, and we have an amendment to the motion from Councillor Black, seconded by Councillor Blackwood. So that goes straight to the vote with votes either for the motion or the amendment. Provost Buchanan.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Motion.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Councillor Balfour.
Motion.
Councillor Binney.
Motion.
Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Coleman.
Motion.
Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner.
Motion.
Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears. Provost, there are 13 votes for the motion. There are 17 votes for the amendment. The amendment carries.
Okay, and just like to thank everybody again for your time and convenience, and the apologies if sometimes I got it wrong. Okay, thank you very much.